Thank you for joining us this evening. It's nice to see a whole bunch of you out there, about 200 this evening for those of you watching at home. All right, so it's a slight exaggeration. 70? Absolutely. Okay, so the report from our closed session is we had some discussions, but we had the immortal no reportable actions this evening. And now I would like to ask Anita Friedman to come forward and give our invocation, if you'd please rise.
Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has created us, sustained us, and brought us together this day. Our God and God of our ancestors, who gives salvation to nations and strength to governments, bless and safeguard our country, our city of Lompoc, and the people who dwell therein. We ask your blessings for our city, for its government, for its leaders and advisors, for all who exercise just and rightful authority, and for all its citizens. Implant within our hearts a steadfast purpose to work together for the safeguarding of freedom, justice, and peace. Grant to all those here tonight such wisdom, understanding, and resolve that they may make decisions which lead our city in justice and righteousness. And let us say, Amen.
And if you join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And on that subject, a happy birthday for America from yesterday, and a glorious fireworks show and a great activity out at Huck Stadium. Thanks, Joanne and the whole crew. And I gave the report, and now a presentation, and it's apropos because it's a Parks and Rec presentation. Come on, guys. This is the whole family. Come on. We'll take pictures for you. Come on. You guys all work together and you get good things done. All right. A proclamation of Parks and Recreation Month for 2011. Whereas the Parks and Recreation profession in California creates community through people, parks, and programs, and whereas our parks help to preserve and protect the natural and cultural resources of California, and whereas Parks and Recreation services support, it's going to be a tough one, services support for more productive workforce, enhances the desirability of locations for business and family, and stimulates tourism revenues to increase a total community development model, and whereas Parks and Recreation strengthens our community image and sense of place and increases cultural unity, promotes health and wellness, and reduces health care costs thereby, and whereas Parks and Recreation fosters human development, helping young people develop and grow into healthy adults, helping adults continue to live longer, and whereas Parks and Recreation facilitates community problem solving, strengthens safety and security, and reduces juvenile crime, and whereas thousands of Lompoc children, adults, and seniors benefit from our wide range of services, facilities, and programs provided by the City of Lompoc Parks and Recreation Department. Now, therefore, I, John H. Lynn, Mayor of the City of Lompoc, do hereby proclaim July as Parks and Recreation Month in the City of Lompoc and urge all residents to recognize and enjoy the social, physical, mental, economic, and environmental and community benefits derived from our parks and recreation services and programs, which provide something of value to each of us. And thank you so very much for the work you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, those in the audience tonight and those at home. As we always like to say in Parks and Recreation, it's time to get outside and play, to enjoy our beautiful parks, our trails, our facilities, our programs, activities, and special events. We like to think that Parks and Recreation has a little bit of value for everybody. It enhances our quality of life. For those of us that, once we're done in the workplace or we're done in the classroom, it's time to go out and rejuvenate, recreate ourselves, have a few minutes of time to go out and have a good time and spend that leisure hours wisely and hopefully in a way that it makes us better people. Last evening, as the mayor mentioned, we started off this month with a great fireworks show in celebration of our wonderful country. Of course, we also like to think that that little spark also started off the month of July for Parks and Recreation Month with a big bang. However, your Parks and Recreation Department has a lot to offer. If you look at the activity guide that comes out 3 times a year, there's ongoing classes, programs, special events, and services that are year-round. Your Parks and Recreation Department is a full-service department, and it's here to serve you. With that, I'd be in trouble because the people behind me will kick me, I'm sure. We have some very special programs this month, as we do every month. However, we have the Rising Star Talent Show coming up on the 23rd. However, if you'd like to spectate, that's on the 23rd, as I said. However, if you want to audition, call our department. Come on down. As well, we have the Lompoc Youth Theater Performance Group, and they're going to be doing The Sound of Music on July 29th and 30th. And it's summertime. It's time to get on that swimsuit and come on out to the Aquatic Center. We have recreation swim every day from 1 to 3, and on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, right now, from 7 to 8:30. In addition to all you lap swimmers, come on down. It's time to get in the water. So with that said, I know you have an agenda tonight. It's time to come out and play, time to recreate. And once again, Parks and Recreation has a little bit of something for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now our City Administrator Executive Director status report.
Mr. Mayor, Council, audience, and viewers, the City Administrator's status report tonight includes 2 letters under my signature prepared by Senior Environmental Coordinator Stacy Lawson in response to the stormwater regulatory matters. To give some background, the State Water Resources Control Board issued a notice of opportunity for public comment on June 7th pertaining to the new draft permit, the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit for small municipal separate stormwater systems. And the notice allows for a 62-day review period ending August 8th. The draft permit is a revision to the current Phase 2 municipal stormwater permit, with which the city must currently comply. In response to this notice, and after cursory initial review of the draft permit, Senior Environmental Coordinator Stacy Lawson found the permit to be contain significant changes, and given the new scope and complexity of these changes, staff determined the 62-day comment period is insufficient for thorough review and understanding. Thus, a letter was drafted on June 29th, sent to the chair of the State Water Resources Control Board under the City Administrator's signature, requesting an extension of the comment period to allow an additional 60 days for review and comment. And this will allow staff and council opportunity to better understand the potential impacts and resources that are proposed from this proposed draft permit. A second letter, also dated June 29th, under the City Administrator's signature, was drafted and sent to the City of Roseville. In response to the release of the draft permit for small municipal separate stormwater systems, a group of local agencies have formed a coalition to address the proposed permit revisions. And the second letter was sent requesting the city to be included as a participant in this newly formed statewide stormwater coalition of agencies. providing opportunity for a cooperative agency response to the stormwater permit requirements. That will be difficult, if not impossible, to comply with all of its provisions. Ms. Lawson will brief council at the council meeting of August 2nd regarding comments on the proposed revisions to this permit. And that is all that I have on the city administrator staff's report. Thank you.
Any questions from the council? Councilmember Lingle?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Barcelona, is there any expense to the city for joining this coalition?
I believe that Ms. Lawson is here tonight.
Council members? No, at this point they are not requesting any money. Basically, it's a conglomeration of agencies who've taken one look at this permit, which just came out on the 7th of June, and said, you know, we're not probably going to be able to comply with this. It's way too costly, and it's going to have an adverse impact on our businesses, our industries, and, you know, our whole city budget. So everybody's just trying to get together because it appears that the state is not interested in extending the deadline. So the deadline is going to be in August for your letters to go in. So I'll prepare a letter for you to consider the August meeting on August 8th.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any staff requests and announcements?
Mr. Mayor and Council, I would bring to your attention that as recently adopted by the City Council and noted in your city handbook, the 11-day council agenda posting procedures for future City Council meetings is underway and will commence this Friday, July 8th, to allow draft council agenda for 11 days prior to the July 19th meeting and future City Council meetings. And also, I'd like to bring to your attention that as City Council adopted recently and is reflected in your City Council handbook, the agenda will reflect a change in that the order of business for council request items will follow the public hearing business items. Thank you. Thank you.
And now, item number 1, the Council Redevelopment Agency request, transmittal of Council adopted Single Purpose Committee's recommendation for improvements, and the committee chairman.
Mr. Mayor, Council, my name is Jim White. I was the chair of the Single Purpose Committee, and I'd like to introduce my partners on the committee. Present is Jim Dixon, and present is Aaron Briggs. Not present is Larry Warner. Oh, Larry's,
he got
I'm
here.
sorry, Larry's here. And former mayor and longtime city council member Mike Szymanski. Mike's not here.
Yeah, Mike was in earlier to talk to me about it, and he's packing to leave at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning for Montana. So, could you all rise so everybody can see you hard-working guys? Come on, stand up. And if we could have a round of applause for the 4 of them, please. Thank you.
As we make our presentation here, I'd like to call upon my my co-members. As all the participants have come together from different perspectives, and we're all users of the system, of the planning and building and development system, but each of us have had different experiences. And so as we go through this, if you fellows wouldn't mind just piping up and coming up and talking about your experiences. We met 9 times. We met over about a 3-month period. I believe we would all agree that we went through the process, all being participants of it, often from the outside looking in. We had a lot of questions. We did a lot of exploratory discussions that often led us beyond our scheduled time. We met for 2 hours at a time. The committee was great because everybody seemed to have a vested interest in what we were doing. And so with this single purpose committee, we've submitted a list of recommendations, and I think it was in the council packet. And if you'd like, I would just go through these in brief form, and then if you had questions, maybe we could answer those for you. The first thing is we were honored to participate. We all want to see some level of change, and we were excited to be perhaps part of what could be a new process here at the City of Lompoc as far as customer service. So one of the first things was, our first thing is the customer applicants are top priority, giving everybody the feel that, that everybody that walks in the door, no matter if they're here for building planning or to pay a bill, that they are a customer of the city, and we as a city are glad that they are here. Paragraph 1A asks for suggests for the Charter of Excellence and Service, and that is an adopted mindset and perhaps a morale building mentality that really provides from the top down in the city the spirit that everybody that walks through the door is a customer. And sometimes the customers aren't friendly. Sometimes, the customers don't want to be there themselves. But anyway, to promote that type of atmosphere. I look to my partners over here, make sure I hit that one right. And then 1B was is for the city and the city administrator to adopt that charter and promote it and see it through. I work at Lompoc Valley Medical Center. We have this type of thing in place, and we are evaluated on it annually. Everybody is, from the top to the bottom and bottom to the top. And the next thing is C1, communication. And the communication part, when it comes to the Charter of Excellence, it's something that we all struggle with, whether it be business or personal life. And people take on when what's going on the inside of the city is not communicated to the outside, it adopts a kind of a persona of closed-minded and behind the scenes, and we don't know what's going on down there. It's a good old boys club and those types of words. So anyway, opening up the communication is going to be key. And if the Charter of Excellence is passed throughout the city, we think that that's true. It's going to make a lot of changes. And the first change, and probably one of the biggest things, is to empower the staff. Often the experience is that we, as applicants doing business at the counter, decisions can't be made readily. They have to go to somebody, and then weeks and sometimes months go by, and come to find out it was just an easy answer. Oh, you want to do that? Fine. I mean, gosh, But meanwhile, the applicant has to wait for this period of time for somebody high in the ranks to make the decision. We recognize that there will be mistakes as we evolve in this process when staff are making decisions that are perhaps wrong. But over time, wrongs will be corrected, lessons will be learned, and I'm sure, and as in many other businesses, it will be easily adopted. Next thing is electronic communications. One of the things that we struggle with is just the return of phone calls, getting a hold of the right person, this type of a thing. So we have a whole paragraph here just basically talking about common courtesy and returning phone calls and emails and that type of a thing. But we all recognize, everybody in the committee recognized that it's often difficult if you're in a meeting all day long that you don't respond to those phone calls or you can't respond to those emails. With that in mind, just some little piece of information that says, hey, I know your project's important to you, and I know your project's costing you a lot of money, and I did get your email. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And most times that's all people are really asking for. That's that courtesy. Next thing is a review standard, create a review policy. Every project is different, but my experience and others was that the review process has to go through several different departments. It could be in one department 2 weeks and another one for 2 days. You don't know when your project's going to come out. Meanwhile, you as an applicant could be spending a lot of money paying trades to be ready. You get contracts signed, so on and so forth. It's kind of a black hole, and you're happy when your project comes out of the process. You just don't know when it's going to come out. And then probably the most important thing is that the folks that are doing the review within the city, if you have somebody, for example, in the water department doing the review on the first pass and there's something wrong and it's rejected, it has to go back through the process again. And you could often end up with a different reviewer opening up all kinds of other issues and that type of a thing. C1, subparagraph D, take ownership. Eliminating the, that's not my problem, you need to talk to so-and-so, and everybody take ownership of the problem. And it's really, as a customer on the outside looking in, we see this as a real customer service advantage, because it definitely would give the customers the perception that everybody cares. Everybody cares, and you know, they're having great customer service. First impressions, we talk about the lobby. It really doesn't lead you where you need to go. There's not really, as I was talking to Councilmember Lingle, a triage spot where you walk in and you say, okay, I need to check in here and I can go there. You usually have to kind of feel it out. And once you've been here a few times, it's not a problem. But for those first-time applicants walking in, whether it be a small development or large development, there's definitely room for improvement. And when we wrote this, by the way, we didn't write this with the idea that the economy is in real rough times and these things may be unaffordable. We wrote it as recommendations for the city to make improvements, and setting aside the economy for a moment, and perhaps maybe it can't be done now, and maybe some small changes could be made that would be no cost, but in the future, when opportunity does exist for a real improvement, that the council can go back to the document. Section 2, revised city ordinances, policies, and procedures. And if I could just call upon Aaron to come up and talk about that. I will, as Aaron comes up, I will tell you that he works for the planning department for Santa Barbara County, and provided all kinds of great insight in this section. Please.
Thanks, Jim. First, I wanted to thank Mayor Lynn for creating this idea and pushing forward the committee, and also Council Member Costa for getting me involved. I appreciated the opportunity to do something for the city. My name is Aaron Briggs. I am a resident of Lompoc, and I am a county planner by trade. And I brought my experience as a county planner to the committee, and I really tried to focus in on the planning process and what could be streamlined, how could we make this process more efficient. And I was really looking for, not the nickel and dime changes that were going to, kind of get lost in the fray, but I wanted to try and identify some big process improvements that would really make a difference to the city's customers. And I think that we did that in two different ways. First of all, the zoning administrator process would essentially simplify the planning process, and rather than having all of your discretionary projects end up in front of the Planning Commission, where we have to mobilize a big crew to get a hearing done, and which could cost a significant amount of money every time we hold a hearing, by creating the zoning administrator process and delegating some of the smaller non-controversial projects to the zoning administrator level, the process could be quicker for the applicant, could be less expensive for the applicant, could also be less expensive for the city, because the process would be quicker and more efficient. And it's something that we implement with great success at the county. And I was surprised to learn that the city didn't have a zoning administrator when I first came on. And after discussing the issue with Arlene, Pelster, and Lucille, we all kind of realized, hey, why didn't we think about this a long time ago? This really could quicken the process for applicants and kind of take a lot of the lower level projects away from the Planning Commission and put them in the hands of someone who can make decisions more quickly. And then secondly, the item under 2C, which is titled Negative Declarations. I don't want to get too deeply involved in the planning lingo, But essentially, negative declarations are environmental documents written by planning staff that take many hours of staff time and considerable expense to applicants because they have to pay for staff time. And there are processes within California's environmental review that allow for what they refer to as exemptions. And I noticed in looking at the city's processes that the city was not utilizing this exemption process frequently enough, and that they were relying mostly on negative declarations even for projects that had no perceivable environmental impacts. And after some discussions with Arlene and Lucille again, we realized that by changing the city's environmental review process to rely more heavily on these exemptions, and we could save a lot of staff time, and I know that staff is being reduced in these tough budget times, so we're going to have less staff on hand in the first place. So by utilizing these exemptions more often, we can reduce the cost to the applicant, reduce the time of the process for both the applicant and staff, and reduce the required staff resources. So I would strongly encourage the city to move forward with the zoning administrator process and also direct staff to review the existing environmental guidelines for the city and fine-tune that to rely more heavily on exemptions. And I've heard through discussions with some of you and some of the Planning Commission members that there may be some discomfort in this zoning administrator process. You guys are somewhat unfamiliar with it. You might view this as a loss of control to a certain extent, but keep in mind that when the zoning administrator makes a decision, that decision is appealable to the Planning Commission and then again appealable to the City Council. So if the applicant or the community members are not happy with a particular decision made by the zoning administrator, there are further remedies that moves up the chain to the Planning Commission where it would have been in the first place. And as part of our deliberations, the committee also recommended that if you're really finding yourselves uncomfortable with this ZA process at the end of the day, that you implement it on a one-year trial basis, see how it works, see what kind of results you're getting, and review it after 1 year, and then you could either decide not to move forward with it or keep it in place if you find that it's working out. And I'll leave the rest of it to Jim and Larry. And I'm here for questions if you have them.
Jim Dixon, committee member. I want to add one thing on the zoning administrator. I've been involved with Lompoc since 1978 and attended hundreds of planning commissions. Many times minor items came before the planning commission. The commissioners looked at each other. There were no questions. The applicant had no questions, and so it was automatically approved. A lot of those actions, all they did was add time. Time is money. Money in the financing of the project, money in the delays of the project. Those are the sort of items I think we need to look at and see if it's possible, non-controversial, that the zoning administrator can handle. My part of this has to do with using existing technology to help track a project. The city has a procedure where projects are logged in and it's tracked. However, often the developer or the engineer or the architect does not know where it is in the process. We're asking that the developer, the engineer, the architect be given access electronically via the internet to that tracking process. And that will allow us to see if plans are stuck someplace, maybe somebody's on vacation. It'll identify that, and it'll allow us to have some communication, find out what the problem is, and perhaps speed up the process and eliminate some problems. The nice thing about all of our get-together with staff and the committee, we found staff and the committee pretty much in 100% agreement. And we've seen the staff already start to implement some of these things. Some of the track-it systems, some of the returning emails, some of the phone calls, it's already being done. So it's been a good process. The other issue had to do with the electronic submittal of plans. In the broad spec contract, they allow the electronic transmittal of plans to their office for review. and we want to incorporate that with as many plans as possible. Obviously, it cuts down on time for mailing, transmittal of plans. You get comments back instantaneously once they're made, and again, that shortens the development process. So we think that's an important part of it too.
I'd like to add real quick to the electronic submittal of plans and the construction, or the planning of the new hospital. The plans were, there's 2 buildings and 2 sets of plans, and each set of plans, when you rolled them up, were about this big around, and those 2 sets were brought down to the city, and then the applicant was paying for those plans to be sent down to San Diego. They were reviewed, and there was corrections requested, sent back here to Lompoc, and then sent to us. And this went on for 3 or 4 times. And so if you just imagine that, you can take all of these plans are created electronically and then printed to paper, and then they go through that kind of that circus, if you will. If we can just leave them electronic and submit them to the city, it becomes a real obvious time saver and real savings to the applicant, like Jim said. I'd like to introduce Larry Warner. And
yes, my name's Larry Warner. I'm a longtime Lompoc resident. Went to high school here and have had a construction business in Lompoc, been in construction business in Lompoc since 1962. Started in high school and just went right on through it. My job, if you would, is almost to bring everything that's been said to the customers of the community. I'm the guy that has to deliver the good or bad information presented to me by the building department, the planning department, whatever department it is, to the customer who's paying the tab and who's being held up or being let to do their job. So I hope that the council will consider adopting, if not all of these, most of these, but hopefully all of these suggestions that we've made. And we have done them with the building department and the planning being present when we were discussing them. So I just hope that you would adopt them, and we'll see how it goes. If not, anything can be reviewed. Thank you.
The last of the recommendations, Section 4, staff and consultant support. We all recognize that when it from whatever industry, that it's easy to try to solve your problems by finding very talented individuals out there that can help you for a fee, and we call them consultants. And in these poor economy times, one thing that we wanted to make sure that was clear as a recommendation is that that we not reach out too much in these times and perhaps not fill positions and so on and so forth, but to try to, as much as possible, keep talent in the house, in town, I should say. The point being is with the broad spec recent contract is for the plan review and that type of a thing, you know, it takes time for consultants or outside companies and whatnot to kind of get up to speed, and then of course the applicant would feel that slow down, and certainly the city staff that are here supporting the applicant would feel that, because it just takes them longer to build up and that type of a thing. Same goes true that if these positions weren't filled, these vacant, not that there is any, but if a certain talented position such as an engineer, that type of thing, were to become an open position, that we again try to keep as much as possible anyway, keep that talent in town. And of course, supporting the community of Lompoc is something that we all hold deep in our hearts. In summary, the committee would like to promote the stronger sense of working together as we strive to make Lompoc the best community possible in the genesis of the SPC's efforts. As the SPC studied the issue and created these recommendations, all efforts were made to create reasonable recommendations with minimal cost impact and with the ability to be executed immediately. And I think we all agree that that's an absolute true statement from us. As a general theme, the SPC recommends that the city led by the city administrator, promote a culture of continuous review toward improvement in providing city services. The SPC further recommends that the city initiate a method of soliciting customer feedback and consider the comments toward future process improvements. It is the opinion of this SPC that if these recommendations are implemented, measurable positive change will be realized almost immediately. We're open for questions.
Who would like first question? Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want to congratulate you and thank you on the job you've done. I mean, I want to start with the word wow. I mean, we talk about consultants, and I think if we had hired consultants to do this, we'd probably be looking at, I'm just taking a guess, but probably a $100,000 bill to get this report. Don't give them ideas. Yeah. No, I just really want to thank you for it. You've touched on so many things that have been brought to us for the past couple of years, and so much of it appears to me as being common sense. Just greeting the customer at the desk, helping them through a process. The chart of excellence. I don't know why we don't have that right now. I mean, I think we've tried in the past to get there. This will be one of my recommendations, is that we do adopt this as one of our performances. I can't find fault in any of this. There will be one thing, and I think I talked to Mr. White about it. We don't have the money to redo the lobby right now. We can certainly ask for some suggestions from people that have used the lobby and maybe make some minor adjustments to it to make it more user-friendly. There is one thing that we talked about in here that you didn't address, I don't think you did, is the importance of having one plan checker reviewing a process as opposed to going to multiple. I was wondering if you could just touch on that briefly.
I briefly did. The experience is that if you, as an applicant, if you submit your plans and it goes through the lengthy process, and that lengthy process, I'm talking about the drawing review process, will go to all the different departments of the city that need to see the drawing set, and you could, Bill Jones could review your plans in the water department, and you know, there's issues that need to be addressed, and so he'll make a pen and ink edit on the drawing, and then when you receive the drawing back, you would you'd look at that and you'd perhaps have a conversation asking him, what do you mean, what did you mean by that, so on and so forth. When it goes back to the review process again, you may not get Mr. Jones, you may get Mr. Green, and he sees it a whole nother way. And so basically, you just kind of go around and around and around until hopefully you can get Mr. Greens and Mr. Jones in the same room, which doesn't often happen. And you know, it's just basic. It's just, you know, single set of eyes review.
Okay, thank you. I just again want to thank you for the efforts you put in, the work you did. I think it's a fantastic report, so thank you.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. I, too, wanted to say thank you so much for the hard work and the time that you all put into this. This is wonderful. These suggestions and recommendations, I'm very hopeful, and I think that they were all done diligently, and you did a great job, so thank you for that. I did have a few questions. Under number 1C, oh, excuse me, yes, C, and then again, number 1C, or excuse me, B, electronic communications. I know that the sentence states, create a standard operating policy to return phone calls and emails promptly. What is the current policy for the county, Aaron, if you could address? Is it 48 hours?
It's 24 hours.
It's 24 hours.
Yeah.
So because there's no specific number, and I would like there to be one here, do you believe 48 hours is a sufficient period of time for our staff to return, you know, even in the most minimal form, a phone call or an email or correspondence?
Mayor Lynn, Councilmember Costa, I think 24 hours is sufficient. I mean, if a staff member is in the office, why wouldn't they be able to return a phone call in 24 hours? I probably return 20 or 30 phone calls a day, 50 emails a day, and I don't have any problem meeting that target ever. It's not that difficult to return a phone call, so I think it should be 24 hours. personally.
Thank you. So I'll have, I'll bring it back to council in a little while and we can discuss that, but I appreciate your input on that. Thank you. And then I too wanted to go back to the zoning administrator. I know that there was some controversy over that with the planning commission, but I do think that we've addressed it fairly thoroughly in that it can still be appealed to the planning commission and also to the city council. However, my one question is, I'm assuming that somewhere along the line this information would be provided to the public on some level so they could review the projects that have been that have gone through the zoning administrator instead of the planning commission?
Yes. At the county, the noticing process is the same, whether it's the zoning administrator, the planning commission, or the board of supervisors. So the notices, they get posted and mailed out, regardless of the level of the decision maker, would be the same. So you're disseminating the same amount of information. You're just making the process quicker and more efficient. And it would still be a public hearing. So if you had neighbors that were concerned about a particular project or an interest group, they would be able to show up and participate in the process, write comment letters, comment verbally at a public hearing. It would just be simplified. It would just be one person making that decision at the staff level rather than 5 different planning commissioners. And like Jim said, a lot of the projects that would be diverted to the zoning administrator are the lower level projects that don't carry controversy, that everybody kind of looks at each other and they're kind of wondering, why are we all here deciding a change of use from an ice cream shop to a barber shop? It's not, there's no real decision to be made there. So this is just a way to reduce costs for the applicant and make it quicker.
Thank you. And I do have 2 additional questions. The last is under staff and consultant support. I know that we've talked about this on other levels and other departments, but we do have one position still budgeted but not funded. Is that correct, City Administrator Barcelona?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Is it correct that we have one position in the planning department that is still budgeted but not funded in the next fiscal year?
That's correct.
Okay, great. So then what I would be curious to know is if you believe that there should be some preemptive agreement, whereas when the revenue reaches a certain point, this one individual should be employed, or this one position should be filled. If that's a way because it seems like we want to keep it in-house, and I'm just trying to figure out so we can ensure that that's what takes place, if we can make some kind of preemptive action towards that. If you had any suggestions, that's just what crossed my mind. If revenues reach a certain point, we can fill this one position. But if you had any other suggestions on how we can do that.
In my experience working for the county, if you have a workload to sustain a full-time employee, you want that person to be in-house, because that way you have more control over that employee. You can train them, you can kind of introduce them to the city's culture, and you can bring them in as part of the group rather than relying on someone who may be 100 miles away, doesn't live in the community, doesn't care about the community, and are basically just looking at it from a nuts and bolts perspective. And I think that there's a lot of value in keeping people local and kind of cultivating your own talent within the organization.
So the emphasis isn't necessarily placed on getting somebody in soon, but it's when the workload reaches, let's bring them in-house, was the suggestion of the committee.
Right. And if you only have enough workload for a part-time employee, that's when it makes sense to go to the consultant, because they can provide you with efficient, targeted service, and they have spare capacity to provide to you. You don't want someone sitting around with only half-time work getting paid a full-time salary. But I think there's a lot of value in keeping people local. They tend to care more about the community and deliver a better work product.
Great, thank you. And then the last question I had was, you have one little sentence about it, and I'm glad you brought it up, which is the method of soliciting customer feedback. Was that something that was just discussed very briefly in the commission, or is that something that you had any other suggestion in regards to? I think that's a very important step here. We ensure that all of these changes are actually making a difference through those kinds of feedback.
We spent, I would guess, probably 6 hours overall discussing customer service, and this idea was briefly discussed, but overall the whole customer service and how do you know if you're doing right, and how and this type of thing. And we all had experiences. We all had positive customer service experiences that we brought to the table and we kind of hoped for at the city. And then again, we all had negative experiences and the idea of trying to avoid that. So when we talked about soliciting, we didn't really want to get any specifics on exactly how we would do that. But certainly the feedback would be important. Certainly measurable at this point. You could measure today, and you can measure and implement changes, and measure, and again in 3 months, and you will see. I know you'll see true change, true positive change.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Councilmember Starbuck.
Thank you. I hope you guys all got along with Mr. Warner okay. I wrote the opening line for the Charter of Excellent Service. It's more like, it seems to me, as a tell me how I can, not how I can't sort of thing is what we're looking for there. And I really agree with you guys. You put it right on the head there. Something simple like name tags will show accountability on things. The empower staff thing, this is something that's so big. This is basic leadership here. I mean, if you can't make a decision at a lower level, then that means that you're in a position to not take vacation, and I don't know anybody there. So this is basic in its thing. And I like the ombudsman process that you've described, basically one person to review and carry your project through. I've heard that from so many people. I mean, I just looked through here and I just went down the line and I agreed. I don't want to rip up the lobby this week, but everything else here, I got to thank you guys, man. I appreciate the time, and you made this very successful. And I think when we're done discussing it, I'd like to go ahead and move that we just implement these changes. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for making my dream come true. Yeah, I think I had one concern in here with regard to one item, and I chatted with our city attorney about it, and that was the change of the concept from using negative declarations for everything to using the other process when possible. And basically, we don't know why we have the policy that we have. We just have it. And so I would surely be in favor of us unwinding that policy at the earliest possible moment. Perhaps we have to unpass something so we don't have to decide, we have to have a big staff report. Maybe we could unhave that next meeting if that was possible, or the one thereafter. I do have a couple questions for Larry. Larry, can you come up? I'm not going to roast you. It's okay. Because I know you know the answer, and I think I know the answer, but I'd rather hear it from you. We've been working on that, the ability of contractors to use the computer system for my recollections about 4 years, and we've kind of struggled with that. And I think it was a server issue for them to access our side of it.
You're referring to the Track-It system?
Yeah. Can you kind of tell us where we're at on that? Because I know you're working on it.
Well, actually, Kevin's working with IS. It's not engineering or public works.
Okay.
It's an information systems project.
Come on down, Kevin.
And
you can have that one. And Larry, don't go away. There's one more I wanted to ask you about. You and I were talking the other day about the digital plan check system through BroadSpec, and they were working their way through some computer issues. Do you know the status on that?
I believe that went live today.
That's good job,
working.
Larry. Right on time.
Oh, that's BroadSpec.
Thank you so very much.
Good evening. So Track-It, that's what the question is about?
And the IT problem and
right.
so on and so on.
We were hoping to have a soft rollout for Track-It for this meeting, and I guess IS has identified some database corruption issues, and they're still working through it. So we're very
Not that close.
Again, Brad would be a better one to ask those questions. I'm on the periphery of getting these things.
Okay, Brad, come on down. Ron, you're next. We're going to find out that there's not enough electricity in the server room, and it's going to be you.
That's not the case. Brad Wilkie, Management Services, in charge IS. In speaking with IS manager and the IS staff that's been dedicated to this project, there are some issues that we're going through right now that have just cropped up, and then we've identified one that is not our issue. It's actually an issue with Track-It because it's common to us and to other users of Track-It. So our request to them has probably helped other agencies with their problems too. So once some of those issues are taken care of, and primarily the issues that we're working with are to make sure that the system security for things that are not Trackit are safe. So our system somebody can't use Trackit to get into our system unnecessarily. But we also want to make sure that we're able to provide Trackit to the users of the system in a way that's most efficient for our operations and for the people that are out there. So we don't have to have somebody here maintaining the system 24/7 to make it available for, we'd rather use the electronics in the system to its best advantage so we don't have to have that kind of user oversight. And we're getting quite close to that point. So
close, like a couple weeks, a couple months, or a couple years?
I really don't think a couple years. A couple months, I would think, at the outset. One thing, as Kevin mentioned, we were looking to try to do a soft launch just to make sure that some of the basic parts of it were available, but there were a few things that we couldn't quite get taken care of that were the technical side that we had to work with each Trackit and with our firewall people. So we wanted to make sure that that security system was not hurt by doing some stuff to try to get the soft launch. So we wanted to get it launched as soon as possible, but not to the expense of system security.
I'm pretty sure I know where you can get 4 volunteers to try it right away.
Yeah.
Thank you. I also had a conversation with our planning staff today about existing relationships we have with some planning consultants to do that peak load work you were just talking about, and was assured that we have contracts and relationships in place to do that. You know, guys, you did an outstanding job. I just want to thank you. I know how much time is involved in creating something like this, having worked on a couple of them. And all I can tell you is you hit every one of them on the money from my standpoint. And so I'd like to just beat Councilmember Starbuck to it, because I would like to move for, I'm sorry. Okay, do it. Thanks, guys. And now, still not going to let you do it. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this subject? Going once, going twice, gone. Now I would like to move the committee's recommendations, which I think are outstanding, with the addition of the 24 hours and that the issue with regard to amending our policy on negative declarations be amended sooner rather than later. And I think everything else is great, and I'd be happy to take my sign ability to help re-sign the lobby. And who would love to second it? Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mary Lynn. I actually had some further discussion.
And who would like to second it now?
I will second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mary Lynn. I believe there's only one other thing that I'd like to speak about. Actually, two. Really quickly, under the existing technology to improve status tracking, there's a bullet that says departmental review information updated daily. And I was just curious if, and I didn't ask this question, my apologies, if this was something that they already did internally, or if daily was something that the commission was trying to implement. I'm sorry, I should have asked that.
That would be with regard to Trackit. Who wants to be the Trackit expert?
I think
Can
I
you,
can
can you
answer
expert that? Okay, go ahead.
Not an expert, but I think I can answer that. The Trackit system would be a system that outside engineers, architects, applicants can log into securely, as mentioned, and to have timely information there. So, for example, if your project has made it through the water department, it's now going to streets, for example, I would guess, it would say so. And so you can see your project moving through. If there was questions in the process, and it was so noted then the applicant can call up the person doing the review and say, can we just solve this over the phone? You had a question, you don't understand something. Instead of it going through all the way through the process and then a stack of drawings ending up on the applicant's desk, that type of a thing. So in other words, more timely exchange of information and questions being answered.
Thank you. The one question I had, and I understand we're trying to expedite, and I think that that's great, 24 hours on response approximately is fine with me, but it actually says updated daily, and I'm just curious if that's something that staff is doing currently, if we know staff updates these things daily, or if this is something that the commission was requesting staff.
From our perspective, it's a request, but there may be more as far as what's going on right now that I don't know about.
Thank you.
Talk about what track it will do when it's done.
Sure.
No, not necessarily. I'm asking if it's something that they currently do now. Do they update this information, although it is still internally, daily or not?
Right. Yeah, TrackIt is a very comprehensive tool. I'm frankly still learning it myself. I'm kind of a baby to TrackIt, but planning uses it, building uses it, all the departments use it internally to track plan checks as well as conditional use permits, and all those encroachment permits, grading permits, all those type of things. So daily, I would say, for instance, in my department, in the building department, when we go out and do an inspection on a construction site, that inspection is uploaded at the end of the day, so that would be daily. Plan review is when the plan review is done, it's uploaded. I don't know that it's uploaded. We don't do every plan review in 24 hours. So, I mean, to that extent, it's not daily, but it's when the plan review is done, it's uploaded to TrackIt. The comments are put on there. So, yes, it's updated as quickly as it's available.
Thank you. And do you think it would be difficult to, I don't know the system very well either, to simply note at the end of the day, still currently in plan check, or still, even though the process takes more than a day, at least so there's knowledge. I'm curious if that's too difficult. I don't want to put too much of a time constraint on that and make it daily if that's going to be too difficult for staff to implement.
What happens is in the building plan check, when we receive a set of plans, there's a due date assigned to it. And so the applicant will know, and it's 7 days or 5 days, whatever it is. The applicant knows by this date I should have a response. So there's that. The clock is ticking on that due date. So he can certainly gauge the performance based on that due date. And I don't think every day we say we're not done yet on this plan. It's still coming. It's just we're looking at that due date. We're managing workflow, and we're getting them done by the time that it's assigned.
So do you understand how that's sort of my question then? So what's the responsibility of staff to update on a daily basis? What was the commission's intention with this language? It says departmental review information updated daily. So if they're still in the middle of a plan check, would you like them to say we're still currently in plan check, or is it okay for them until the I'm sorry to get so down to the details here.
Oh, not a problem for us. No, that was not the intent. If it's in a 7-day review, that type of a thing, on the third day it would not be necessary because the applicant would know that there's a 7-day cycle. So, but on the other hand, if there are comments that that on the third day, for example, of the 7-day period that the reviewer had, that would be an opportunity for a phone call. And so that would definitely apply to our intent. It would precipitate a phone call, and they could probably answer that question. That discussion could happen, and that issue could be closed on the third day. And then meanwhile, the review continues on.
Thank you. So my question to you, City Administrator, is if you believe we should somehow alter the wording there, because I think that that's misleading.
Councilmember Costa, that would be my recommendation, that this would be amended to a realistic cycle per deadline. If it's 7 days, then choose either the 7 days or 5 days just to give an update within that cycle.
Was council okay with that change? Is your motion so amended?
Absolutely.
Okay. I have one other thing to go over, if that's okay.
I got one when you're done.
Okay.
Because
So
it sparked a question.
the other thing I wanted to talk about was that customer applicants are top priority. I think that coming up with the charter is a great idea. And I know that we've talked about this very briefly at one of the workshops, and that's about incentivizing things. So, not only are there benchmarks for success that if you don't reach, there's, you'll be reprimanded for, but small incentives for staff to be doing these things. And I know monetarily that's not necessarily what we're looking for, but I would like to just get some feedback from council. I don't know, something silly. Well, not silly. I mean, actually, I think it means a lot to whomever would receive it. But an award, you're the Excellent Customer Service Award, Employee Award, and maybe you get a bouquet of flowers, or maybe you get a movie ticket. And I know that sounds very minimal, but I think it's about us also being engaged and appreciating the hard work that they're going to be putting in when they receive this charter. Not that they don't already, but making this a more sort of formal thing. I think that incentivizing it can only make it even better. So that's sort of what I'm saying. I want to establish a positive relationship with employees. So this was something that came across my mind is, if there's any small way to incentivize that to show value, that we really truly value the hard work that they're doing. Thank you.
City Administrator, can you include that in your thought pattern when you work on that section, please?
Mayor and Council, I can look at that and just know that that would be a new program that would require some funding.
Sorry, guys, you got to come back one more time, Kevin. I got one that got me thinking about something, and I know I don't understand it, so you can explain it to all of us. So a set of plans come in, and they have a number of departments that they have to route to. And I believe our current situation is sequential. It goes to one and the next and the next. I could be wrong. My question would be, is there a disadvantage to having it go to all departments simultaneously rather than going sequentially, which can create some longer time frames? Right. You can speak to that, please.
Sure. The process right now is we receive a set of plans. Our development of services counterperson assigns that, depending on what it is, assigns it to all the reviewing internal city departments that need to review it. They get a email through Trackit that says there's a plan ready for you to review. So they all receive notice at the same time. We have a set of plans at the front counter where they need to come down, pull a set of plans, look at them, check them out, whatever they need to do. Maybe they just do their review right at the counter. If it's more detailed, they take them with them and they return whenever they need to return. But they are not, so we don't have the water department waiting on the engineering department to get done with the set of plans. That's not what happens. Everybody gets the email at the same time, and they need to figure out when they can come down to City Hall and do their review and get their comments back into Trackit. So I think we're there already.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Sure. Councilmember Lingle. Oh, sorry. Come on down.
Sorry. This plays into one of our points. The benefit of an electronic submittal is it goes out to everybody at once. They don't have to wait to route a set of printed plans. So that's the benefit. If the applicant wants to electronically submit it, it gets into the system and it'll get out of the system faster.
Thank you. Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to see if you'd amend your motion with one more amendment, and that is I'd like to see a monthly status report on the process of the implementation of these recommendations so they don't get lost in the shuffle. So just a monthly update is what I'd like to see.
Okie doke. Yeah, I'm fine with that. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Marilyn. And again, lastly, I wanted to come back to that quick sentence there at the end, the method of soliciting customer feedback. Because we didn't get a specific recommendation, City Administrator, if possible, with you and staff together, if you guys can come up or provide information on how feedback is already received, because I know we do get feedback already, but if you guys have an idea of how to further that as to be implemented, please bring that back to us as well at a date uncertain, of course. But please, it's a very small sentence, but don't forget that, because I do think that's very key in quantifying the changes that are being made. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or discussion? Joe, you look like you want to say something. No? Okay. And seeing no one else turn their lights on, can we vote, please? And that passes 4-0 with one absent. Now, I think we need to give the committee a round of applause from the dais already. Don't wander off too far in your lives, because I'm sure we'll be back looking for your help again. Thank you so very much. And the clock's back on its own time? Oh, is it right? Okay. We had an issue with our atomic clock earlier. I think it had a momentary nuclear problem. Okay, and now we go to item number 2, the Lompoc Rotary Club offer of a street clock donation. And Ron, with the simulated clock in his office.
That was a nice segue for me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council, staff, people from the community. Tonight, staff is asking for the City Council to consider the Lompoc Rotary Club's offer to donate a street clock to the city. The club, for over a couple years, has been discussing its offer with the city for donating this town square style clock for installation in the Old Town area. The description of the clock is as follows. It's a 4-sided town square style clock. You may have seen some around. A lot of the local towns have them as well. There's one nice one in Santa Barbara, and there's one in Orcutt. This clock has an approximate value of $18,000. The manufacturer is the Verdon Company, which is in Cincinnati, Ohio. The clock structure itself is 12 foot 7 inches, and the width of each clock face, the 4 sides, 3 foot 3 inches, and the dials are 24 inches across. It will be green with gold trim. The green will match the other street furniture in the city, in the Old Town area. And we've arranged for brass City of Lompoc inserts to be put in each of the 4 faces. It's electric powered, and it has lit faces. The electric requirement is approximately a street light, and we have a couple thousand of those, so it'll behave like one more street light. So here is a dimensional diagram and a picture of the clock. This clock here happens to be in Ellsworth, Maine. It's black, but you can see that it's a pretty prominent look as far as trying to make a statement about one's community. When we looked in the Old Town area, we identified several sites, and only 2 of them warranted us to look additionally for the suitability. And they're shown on this diagram. The one site we call the median site, which is in the median. It would be centered approximately between the Oddfellows building and the Southside Coffee. And the other location we considered was in the Planter, which is in front of the Oddfellows building. We moved our mock-up of a clock around to several other spots in the area to see if there were any others that looked like they would lend themselves well to making a statement about entering the community. And we thought that these 2 were the ones that we should look at in more detail. So our mock-up clock, you'll be able to see it when I move in this picture a little bit closer, but our mock-up was really a Manna or another Westinghouse clothes dryer box, and those boxes are almost within an inch or 2 the size of the clock box. So we put that on a survey poll to kind of look at how the clock would look in these different locations. So here is the median location as viewed from moving south down the center of H Street. Here is the same view from the lane to the right, it's up closer. And so that's the clock there. And it's for both visibility and aesthetic reasons, we thought that this was a preferred location. And that mentioned earlier by Aaron Briggs about being categorically exempt, that is the case with this particular location. The other location, which I'll show you in a minute, since it's next to a historically significant building, it would not be categorically exempt. So that also helps us to move things along. So here's a close-up of the clock again, and that's about the location. There's a little bit of play in that median that can be, within maybe a 10 or 12-foot range. And the additional work that we would do on the median is it would be widened by 3 feet. So it'll take it from 4 feet to 7 feet. And that would mean that there would be no likely vehicular interference with the clock. The danger being not so much that a vehicle would hit it, but sometimes, the side mirrors stick out of an extra foot or so, and there's that possibility for clipping a structure. This shows you the what we call the planter location, and you could see it on the right side. It's over there in front of the Oddfellows Temple. There's a lot visually to compete with over there. There's the signal and street light structure of Caltrans, which is fairly massive. There's also the awning or cantilevered roofing that comes out from the Oddfellows Temple, and there's not real good visibility when you're viewing it coming from the south, coming and making your left on Ocean and coming into the city, because it gets kind of caught in the structures in the back. This shows it up close, and you can see if you're coming down H Street, moving south, that there's a lot of competition, and that from this is taken from the inner lane, and you could see that still the light standard and signal standard interferes with the visibility of the clock. And so this is at the position where we can make the clock most visible if it were to be in the planter location. So now these photos, I'm going to just kind of go back, and we're kind of looking at it from the three restraining lines or crosswalks between around the intersection. So this is the view that you'd see of the clock if you're coming from Ocean and you're coming in from the south and you're moving west. This is what you'd see if you were up close in the intersection and you were crossing the street going from on the south side, and you were going from the east side to the west side. And this is the view if you're coming from the west. It's roughly taken from the position one would be in if they were crossing the street from Sue's Place and going to the walking over to south side. And this is a position of the clock taken from the metal sculpture yard that's across almost kitty corner from this particular location. So that's some of the kind of visuals of how the clock might look. It would look a lot nicer than a cardboard box on a survey pole. But that, I think, gives you some idea of the perspectives that you'd see from various angles. So this is the schedule that we've established. The city received the donation offer letter from the Rotary Club, and you have a copy of that at your places up there. City staff started discussions with the Rotary Club in May or June. Tonight we're here to make the recommendation that the clock be accepted by the City Council. September 30th is the most likely delivery date according to the manufacturer, so that would give us October to install the clock and November or at the holiday period to have a dedication. City has certain responsibilities because the Rotary has offered to acquire and deliver the clock to the city, but we're still going to have to do some things within the city to make it functional. So we've kind of ballparked what the cost would be. We still would have to take bids to find out exactly what it would cost us, but there would be a foundation design, and there would be some median work and the actual installation of the clock. The electrical work would run from the street lights that are on one of the two sides of South H and would run out to that median. That particular median section does not have electricity at this time. There are other advantages of having electricity there for additional lighting and for street tree lighting that we can't now do. So we think it's proper that this electrical work be charged to the electric system. And then to purchase the brass inserts on each side that'll say City of Lompoc, that would be $525. And I put in just 10% for contingency. So you could see that the costs would probably be around $20,000 to $23,000, depending on if the contingency had to be used and where the bids come in. And the monthly operating costs are roughly the same as a street light. It'll be $20 to $40 per month. So the next steps are to determine the exact cost placement, and we'll have primarily our planners work on that. And like I said, the median looks like the best location, and just be a matter of maybe sliding it in one direction or the other to get the best visibility and aesthetics. And then we would secure bids for the electrical and median work. And I think these bids are probably, these estimates are probably a little bit high, and we tend to estimate a little higher, and then when we take bids, we get people to sharpen their pencils, and generally we come in below what we expect the estimate to be. And the other thing would be the allocation of the city funding. We'd come back to you with that. We're working now with RDA and CBDG to look at what funds they would have available to use for the clock, which would spruce up that area. And then finally would be to install the clock and have a dedication. So summarizing, the presence of the town square style clock in the Old Town area will bring a focal point to the city for both the visitors and residents. The city staff and the Rotary Club working together had recommended that the ideal placement is in the center median of South H. The Lompoc Rotary Club's donation will be acknowledged with the placement of a plaque at the base of the clock or an adjacent pedestrian sidewalk. The thought being that if it's in the sidewalk, everyone sees the plaque. If it's out in the middle of the median, people might have to, run out and risk getting hit to see who provided this to the city or what does the plaque say. And then lastly, the schedule indicates that the clock can be installed and operational prior to the 2011 holiday season. So I know we have a representative or two of the Rotary Club that might also want to speak, but that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Bob, are you the speaker on this, or is there someone here? Bob Manning, come on down.
Good job. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, staff, ladies and gentlemen, I was president of the Rotary Club from July of 2006 to June of 2007. And I don't know, I assume most of you know, having lived here a few years, that each year the president of the club has a project that he proposes, and that this clock was my project. So that's why I'm the one that's making the presentation. Ron did a great job of telling you the whole story. I mean, I spent a lot of time talking to a nonprofit that owns a piece of property at H and Ocean, and we had
numerous fits and starts, and finally I gave up on him and went to Ron, and we got it done. So I want to compliment the city for getting the job done quickly. He outlined the whole time scenario. I think the only thing I would add to that is that our belief is, or our hope is, that with the installation of the clock, it would encourage investors and the property owners in the area and the city to redevelop Old Town. And I think that's really a key ingredient to this city. So I would very much appreciate a affirmative vote. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's just go on to public comment. So all you who would like to speak on this, come on down.
My name is Alice Milligan. I live in Lompoc. Mayor Lynn, members of the council staff. I'm here to support the report that was made by Mr. Stassi. First of all, I'd like to personally thank the Lompoc Rotary and also Bob Manning for selecting this as a project for downtown. What a wonderful Christmas present for 2011. And it will really, as Mr. Stassi said, enhance our downtown. I think it'll give it a certain class, so to speak. I know when I go to other communities and see clocks, I'm always impressed and excited when I see them. And so I would like to support staff recommendation to have the clock placed in the medium. I think it will provide more visibility as opposed to in competition with street lights and murals and buildings. And again, I would also like to thank Mr. Stassi. He not only got a hold of this project when it came on his desk, it didn't lay on his desk, he went with it, and I really appreciate his expediency. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else like to speak on this?
Good evening. I'm Will Schuyler. I live in Lompoc. I don't remember how long ago. It was probably 20 years, maybe 25 years. There was a group in Lompoc that was wanting to put a clock in the center of town. The proposal at that time, if I recall right, was to hang a cable across from the 4 street lights and hang it in the center of the intersection in there. I know the Oddfellows Lodge received a letter asking for donations for it, and there was some money collected. Now, I don't know where it went, if it came to the city or chamber or just where it went, but that's was the price. So when I saw this on the deal, I thought, history does repeat itself. It's back again. I would concur with putting it in the median. If you go on the north side location, I'm sure Caltrans is going to come in and give you their 2 cents into it and turn it into maybe a $20,000 project to $100 million or whatever they come up with. So I think putting it on the city side that we have control on is number one. And I do appreciate the thought of the Oddfellows building and the historical city. But even though it's a historical type clock, it probably still would not fit for that period. So the council's being asked, it says the clock will say City of Lompoc or Lompoc. I heard tonight City of Lompoc, and I would encourage you to have it say City of Lompoc. And you're expanding that medium to 7 feet wide, so I don't know why the plaque couldn't be out by the clock. The medium as it is now might be a little bit of a traffic hazard, but remember, you're going to add 3 feet to that medium. So I think plaque at the location would be sufficient. And I would like to see this happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one rise, we'll close oral communication, and we're going to give Councilmember Lingle first crack since he's part of the Rotary.
Thank you, Mr.
Clocky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of questions for Mr. Stassi. The expense on this, are any of these expenses just transfer? Will the city be doing any of this? I know you're going out for a bid for some of it, but will the city be doing any of this work? So it would just be a city transfer from one department to another, or is this actually all out of pocket?
The electrical I could speak to directly, and we have 2 ways of doing it. We could do it with city crews or take bids. And what we did to establish the price, we called one of the local contractors, said, hey, come meet us out in the field. If we did this, what would you do it for? So it's either going to cost about $9,000 from the city or from us, and that decision hasn't been made yet, probably be based upon our workload. We still sometimes need to have the street trenched by others, that we don't do that. So coming from the street light on one of the two sides of H Street, we would have some contractor work, but would not necessarily be able to do it all. I talked to the civil engineering people in Public Works, and they have a firm they use to design foundations, and so that $900 cost was an estimate of what it would cost to have them design it. They're very efficient, and they do those designs for the city all the time where we need anchoring or foundations. And then the balance of the street work, just talking to the Public Works folks that gave us the estimate, that estimate was done based upon utilizing a contractor, but doesn't have to be that way. I guess I can't commit the Public Works people to do the work, but I'm sure you could.
Well, I have another question for you, but I'd like to encourage the city to utilize city crews where possible so we don't have the out-of-pocket expense. The other question is, and when I was reading the report, I was kind of shocked at the monthly cost of $20 to $40 per month for this clock. I mean, it seemed like a lot of money. And then all of a sudden I thought, well, could you have a little solar unit on there? And I thought, well, Bob, this clock has to operate at night without the sun. But the on the middle of the freeways where they have the phones, those operate at night. So there are solar units that do operate. I don't know if they have a battery that charges or anything.
You'd need a battery.
Okay.
If you were to do that.
Have we considered utilizing? I mean, you're looking at possibly saving, the $900 for the connection, the $20 to $40 a month. Have you considered looking at a little solar unit to operate the clock?
No, we didn't look at it, but my gut feeling is by the time you have a battery system and you have the solar panels and place them where you need them, that you'd have a lot of electrical work, because you wouldn't want to put the solar panels out in the median, because that would then distract. So you'd put the solar panels back in an alley or someplace far away, and you have the solar panels and the battery there, and then you'd have a longer electrical run associated with that, because it's a very simple electrical run to go from the street light to the clock, because it's the same voltage. So there's no conversion equipment like solar panels or DC to go to AC. You don't need a converter or an inverter, and you don't need the voltage to match up, and you don't need to check periodically for maintenance on the panels.
Okay. I mean, I'll take your word for it because you're the expert, but I wasn't envisioning a large solar panel like on the roof of a house. These emergency phones on the freeway, it's a little, 10 by 10, 12 by 12 solar panel. I mean.
Yeah, but phone requirements are low, and the phone isn't on all the time. It might not be on for, 6 months before anyone uses it, so it would stay fully charged. But if people were using the phone all the time, there'd be big panels.
Okay, so you have considered it. I'll check that off. Thank you.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Marilyn. I do have two questions for you, Mr. Stassi. The first is, of the $10,000 that's cited for the mounting, curb mix, and foundation installation, how much of that $10,000 is for the widening of the median in H Street?
Predominant amount. I don't have the breakdown. We asked the Public Works engineers to come up with the cost, and they came up with the recommendation to widen it, and so they included it in one number. The individual who did it, Mike Luther, who's a civil engineer, I don't think is here tonight, but he did just a joint number for that.
And so, in your opinion, if the location was somewhere where you wouldn't need to widen a median, would we have a almost significantly lower total cost to install the clock?
No, because the installation is still key. Widening a median is pretty simple. Just chip one out and you form a new one and you put it in. I think that's probably a very small part of the cost. That the actually going in and installing the clock, putting the foundation in, because the $900 is just to design the foundation. So you have the cost of the foundation is one element. you have the cost of the widening the median. That's another element, but that's a relatively small element. And then you have the installation and the hookup, which is one of the other major elements.
Okay, thank you. I must have misunderstood your first statement. I thought you said that that was the predominant side of the cost, but it actually sounds like it's the minimal side of the cost.
For just the widening. The median work, if I use that term, I hope I did, the median work would be the foundation, the installation, and the median widening, and all the associated cleanup.
Okay, so we can be sure that regardless of where the clock is actually placed, the cost will stay relatively the same.
That's true.
Okay, and then the second question I had is, I know that you considered multiple locations. You showed us two. Were there any locations on or around I Street that were considered?
No, there were not. We stayed just with the what you might call the active downtown area now, and the principal thing that kind of drove that location was people coming in from the south are coming up H, and then they're making, or excuse me, coming west on Ocean, and then they're making a right on H. So they get the clock gets the exposure that way. People coming from the north come down H, generally make a left on Ocean to do what they're going to do, but if it was on I, we'd miss that kind of major Highway 1 routing of traffic.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have for staff, but I do have a couple comments for council. Really quickly, I guess my largest concern here is that we haven't updated our downtown specific plan. I said this when this was brought to us previously during the budget workshop, and that's sort of my concern. I think that the future of downtown is still up in the air, and what the plans are actually going to be. I think that if we put the clock where it's proposed, it's going to look beautiful. There's no question. I am so appreciative of this donation. I really, truly am. And this is definitely going to be a wonderful asset to our downtown. However, I would hate to prematurely place this if the future of downtown or the epicenter of what we consider downtown changes, or if there are any large shifts, which at this point we don't really know. So that was something that I wanted to ask council about, if, you know, we can accept the gift, and I would hate to say this, I know I'll probably get some criticism for this, but hold on to it for a little while until we figure out really where the future of downtown is going, because I'm getting kind of frustrated that nothing's really happening down there, and it kind of seems like, you know, everything's kind of hobnob put together, and something doesn't work, and so we haven't kept going with it, and I would just hate to see us, you know, put it in prematurely, and that was sort of my comment on that. Thank you.
Councilmember Starbuck.
I don't get to talk about downtown often, so I'm going to take advantage of this. It's green, it matches, I'm for it. Downtown. I tell you, I think it's a generous gift of the Rotary, and I really wouldn't want to put it down in a lay-down yard somewhere and not take advantage of it. I'm particularly like the idea of the added benefit of the power in the median, because if you know, you go into the 200 block of South 8th Street when they light up the trees and there was power out there available, and when the Old Town Market Street fairs and other things were able to utilize that power. Now we'll be able to do it in the 100 block also. So I think there's a side benefit there that we're overlooking that will benefit us. I know where there's an old flagpole that came out of Ryan Park that could maybe go on the other end of that median. I don't know, but
And I don't know if the first strip of the median that stops at the alleyway, that's unpowered, but I think the second
does
half
have power.
Does have
yes.
power.
The first one does not,
Right,
no,
correct.
but it will when this clock is installed there.
Yes.
So now you would have power down the middle all the way.
Yeah, we'll have it all along
the whole town.
the-
Yeah. I personally, I think I would love to just take a vote on this and support it. I have no problems at all with it, and I think that the installation price is probably worth it in the long-term use of downtown. So, thank you, Ron and Rotary.
Yes, I'd like to make one comment on what Ms. Costa said. We did involve the city planners to make sure that, you know, we weren't doing anything that conflicted with the plans for the downtown area, and they played an active role in working to select the style and height and everything else that they thought was compatible with the planners' long-term visions for the downtown area. And so that's reflected in the current general plan.
Councilmember Lingle.
Yeah, and I'd just like to also address Councilmember Costa's comments. First of all, I appreciate your comments. It's something that we should consider. However, the clock only has a 15 to 20-year guarantee, so we may not get to the downtown plan before then. So. Okay. Thank you.
You want one more bite? Councilor Costa.
Thank you, Mary Lynn. I want as many bites as possible to represent my opinion here, and that's, I appreciate that you worked in conjunction with the planning department, and again, I wanted to restate that this is a very valuable asset, and I do appreciate the donation here. But we've all agreed that the downtown specific plan has become stagnant, so there really is no long-term picture that anybody can necessarily be looking at. So I'm not sure what the planners are looking at or what their opinion is. I know that we don't necessarily have a cohesive idea of what the future is, and I really hope it doesn't take 15 years from now, my goodness. However, in the interim, I am more than willing to put this clock up where it's proposed in the media, and I think that it will look great, and for the holidays especially. So thank you.
Okay, I'd like to also thank the Rotary for their offer and cooperation, and the planning people for their input, and Alan for putting together the slides for me on short notice today. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so here's my mayor story. As we were talking about this, I was thinking about the watch shop in Banning, California, that had a clock that looked kind of like this out front. And always on the way home from high school, we'd look at the clock and make sure we're going to get home on time. And so, yeah, fond memories of a street clock. I think it's outstanding. I see Councilmember Costa's point, and I recall having looked at the downtown plan put together by the university group in 2003. There was one in that general vicinity, but I won't swear to the location, and I won't swear to 2003, but I can see the pictures in my mind's eye. So I think being as Bob's in the Rotary, we could let him make the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd be honored to. I move that the City Council accept the offer of the Lompoc Rotary Club to donate a four-sided town square style clock for installation in the Old Town area, in accordance with the terms stated in the staff report.
Councilmember Costa?
Thank you, Marilyn. Just one question, Councilmember Lingle. I wanted to quickly address the idea of the plaques. Mr. Schuyler did address that as well. Do you have a preference as to where those would be placed? If the median is expanded, would you mind those be on the clock themselves, or would you want them on the adjacent sidewalks?
Let's ask the Rotary representative where they prefer it to be.
Thank you.
On the clock, on the base, right on the base, right coming down 8th Street.
So I guess the opinion is on the base of the clock.
And now a second.
I'll second it.
And it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing no lights lit, could we vote, please? And that passes 4-0 with one absent.
You what?
Oh, my. All right. And now item number 3, recommendation regarding redistricting of Santa Barbara County from our city administrator, Laurel Barcelona, who is returning from the place everyone else has been. And it was kind of you to wait for everyone else.
Members, Honorable Mayor and City Council members, in addition to Council following the state redistricting efforts are underway to determine the Santa Barbara County Supervisorial District. And attached to staff's report is a letter addressed to the Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors for the mayor's signature, supporting any proposed redistricting map plan that would keep the city of Lompoc and its citizens whole and does not split the city between two supervisorial districts. Back in April, the County of Supervisors asked county staff to solicit ideas, suggestions and actual redistricting proposals from the public at a series of county public workshops. A total of 16 redistricting proposals from the public were accepted and have been made public for viewing prior to the county board's consideration at their meeting of July 12th in Santa Maria. Of these 16 maps, 6 proposals keep Lompoc whole, and copies of these maps have been provided to City Council and are available for the public and have been placed on the table in the lobby. Compliments of Ms. Carol Benham. A matrix has been completed and distributed to City Council tonight, and this matrix summarizes 16 map versions, and she created whether or not these maps keep Lompoc intact, and whether it includes Lompoc with the village, Vandenberg Village, includes Lompoc with Mission Hills, Lompoc with Mesa Oaks, or includes Vandenberg Air Force Base, and whether or not it includes redistricting with IV, Isla Vista area. So I will turn this matter back over to the mayor and council, and that concludes my staff report. Thank you.
Yeah, Carol, you did a lot of work on this. Do you want to add a few words to this before we start public comment? You can be the first public comment. Come on down. Okay. Before we get too far in, let's have public comment. Who would like to speak on this subject?
Mayor, members of the council, staff, I'm here to support 6.
You have to say your name.
Oh, I'm sorry, Alice Milligan, live in
Thank you.
Lompoc. On the chart that you have before you, there are 6 plans that keep Lompoc intact, and I'm very much opposed to splitting the city of Lompoc, as I know from your letter the city council is as well. Actually, Lompoc could remain as it is and status quo and still meet the requirement of the population. And I think it's really important that people attend the Board of Supervisors meeting next Tuesday. I think public testimony will start at either 9 or 10. I've heard both figures. And it will be at the Betaravia Center in Santa Maria. And it will be very important for people in the community to attend and speak their voice, so that Lompoc will not be split. It's important that we have one representative on County Board of Supervisors. We are going to have, for those people in the viewing audience, a table at the Old Town Market where we'll be distributing copies of the plans so that people will have information and hopefully be able to use that information as they attend the meeting on Tuesday in Santa Maria. And I appreciate the fact that the council is sending a letter to the Board of Supervisors, but hopefully if each of you can attend the meeting on Tuesday, that would even be more powerful. So thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Paul Rosso, and I live in Lompoc. For over 40 years, we have lived here in Lompoc. And the city of Lompoc has always been the poster child for gerrymandering, whether for the congressional, state senate, or assembly districts. And 10 years ago, with the supervisors' districts in 2001, our beach was removed from supervisor's district to satisfy the whim of a former supervisor. I want Lompoc Valley residents to continue to receive the representation its size deserves. I oppose splitting the city into pieces, as everyone does, I'm sure. There are 16 versions, and there is one version that keeps the entire Lompoc Valley, Lompoc, Vandenberg Village, Mission Hills, and Mesa Oaks in a single supervisor's district, ensuring Lompoc has a strong voice on the board. It's map 8, called Flisher, and I don't know who that is. It's a reasonable, thought-out mapping site, but there are a couple of questions that come out with all of these sites. Whether Ocean Park and Vandenberg Air Force Base are in the proposed 3rd district, as they should be. Finally, there is the hot potato issue of Isla Vista. It should not be in the same district as Lompoc, or we will lose any meaningful representation. If one looks at Lompoc's CCD from the Census Bureau and the Solvang CCD, the total number is 80,412 for those two districts, where each supervisorial district requires 84,779. That only leaves 4,387. So between the entire valley, all the way out to San Ynez, we could be one place. And the other reason for bringing up Ocean Park, there was a proposal before the Board of Supervisors that they start charging us for parking. Well, I probably go out there 50 times a year, and if I got to pay $5 each time, I'll never go out again. And my concern is our supervisor in Lompoc does not represent Ocean Park. It is the Solvang representative now, as I understand it, and therefore, no great concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Carol Benham, Lompoc resident. Mayor, City Council members, first, thank you for putting this on tonight's agenda. I wanted to share with you that before the county released the 16 maps last week, I heard repeatedly from people that it was not possible to redraw the county reflecting the population changes and keep Lompoc intact. I heard that over and over again. When they released these 16 maps last week, we now know it's been proved that it is possible to keep Lompoc intact. We have 6 versions of these maps that keep Lompoc intact. One, as has been stated, number 8, includes the entire Lompoc Valley, representing about 59,000 people, which would make the Lompoc Valley a very important component of any supervisor's district. We have 2 others, maps number 7 and 11, that keep Lompoc intact within its city limits. There are 3 others that keep Lompoc intact within its city limits, with the exception of a small wedge of land north of the airport, west of Harris Grade. It's the same configuration that our supervisorial district has now. So we know it's possible to redraw Sacramento County and keep Lompoc intact. Thank goodness. So I thank you for putting this on tonight's agenda. I think there were going to be some slight changes to the language. I would urge you to make your statement as strong as possible, perhaps even make recommendations for specific maps, a first choice, and then other acceptable choices. One of the reasons I'd like to have more than one choice listed is because 9 of the maps, more than half of these maps, not only split Lompoc, they also put the split Lompoc into a district with Isla Vista, which further marginalizes Lompoc's voters. So I think it would be good for us to be able, for you to be able to say the ones that seem acceptable. And I also wanted to share with you, as you know, the state redistricting is in process. If Lompoc is still bisected for the state and the assembly, and those division lines for state senate and state assembly differ from each other, I did a quick little sketch of some of the maps that bisect Lompoc for the county. And some of them are crazy little zigzag lines all over the place. And I did a sketch of overlaying them. In some cases, the city of Lompoc would need 9 different ballots because of being bisected, divided by 3 entities in 3 different ways. I don't think that's what we want. I also want to echo anyone that can go to the July 12th Board of Supervisors meeting in Santa Maria, please go. It does start at 9 o'clock. I've been told by the staff, county staff, that they hope to take it up about 10, but your presence can really be helpful to us because 9 of the maps want to bisect us. So I thank you for that. It's time for Lompoc to speak up for itself. If you can't go to the supervisors meeting, please send a letter or an email to all 5 supervisors, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Next. Seeing no one rise. Oh, there we go. One more. Come on, you guys.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members, Dwayne Holmdahl. I'm not going to go into a lot. Everything was said right, but the one thing that you have to realize too for ourselves is that a supervisor who represents, if there's 2 of them in this area, then they've got to have two offices here. The county don't have the money to keep all the offices up to date. When you have it one, as a former county supervisor, when I had a big area, the longer you had a bigger town, which Lompoc was at that time in the 80s, it was fine. Then you had San Ynez Valley in each one of those. But the supervisors would have one whale of a hard time really representing Lompoc itself if you have 2 of them in here, because they're going to decide which one's going to represent Lompoc, because they're not going to do both. And if you split the town, the supervisors are going to take it upon themselves to say, well, I'll let you go ahead and take care of whatever they want, and I won't spend my time in Lompoc. So especially if you got it tied with Isla Vista or the rest of them. So that's what you really have to look at when you start selling to the supervisors on the 12th, and that's what I'm going to tell them if I get there in time, is the idea that splitting it up, they don't have the funds right now to have 2 shops in town. Say if you split it in half. Now, Johnny Gray right now has one of the vets building, and the other one will have to come in. They'll all have different times. It's considered how big the district is, how they're going to travel, and where they're going to be. So that is the one thing. Lompoc will lose good representation when you have 2 in an incorporated city. And I think if we can go ahead and especially keep Christian Hills, Vandenberg Village, the prison, and the Air Force Base, we would have the totals we need.
Thank you. Next.
I don't know if this question has already been addressed.
Could you say your name, please?
Mary Saladino, Lompoc resident. In what has already been said, I didn't catch who is going to be getting Vandenberg Air Force Base.
It's different on different maps.
Okay, well, that would be one concern that I would like the council to be very aware of. And the other is, how is this going to affect our school district? Because it seems as though Lompoc, Vandenberg Village, Mission Hills, Mesa Oaks are all a major part of our school district. And if we're cutting our city in different pieces, how is that going to affect how the schools are going to be receiving their funding? So please consider that.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Lynn, City Council, Joyce Howerton, Lompoc. I just want to give a different perspective on this, and I'm sure I'm in the minority in this room, but I would suggest that you look at splitting the city of Lompoc. You know, for a very long time, Lompoc has been all but ignored. We have no voice, we have no clout, and oftentimes we don't have any representation. And so by splitting the city of Lompoc, we would be like the city of Santa Barbara and the city of Goleta and the city soon to be of Santa Maria, where we would have not 1 but 2 supervisors representing us. And I attend a lot of different meetings and events countywide, and I can assure you that when I'm in Santa Barbara, I see both supervisors that represent that area. And when I'm in Goleta, I see both supervisors that represent that area. I think that we get more and not less, that we need somebody to look at Lompoc and pay attention to our community
And if we have two voices speaking for us and two voices that are making sure that our issues and our needs don't go ignored, I think that gives us more clout. So I understand this is already sort of decided, but I would just encourage you or people in the audience that are listening at home to think about it. We need to have more representation, not less, and I think by splitting Lompoc we would get that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this subject? Seeing no one rise, we'll close oral communications, come back to the council. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mary Lynn. I wanted to thank Ms. Benham for providing information. She's been so wonderful to us throughout the redistricting process on all levels. And thank you, Ms. Howerton, for your comments. I did think long and hard about that. And I, at first, really thought that that may be the correct way to go. But my fear, as Ms. Benham stated, is, you know, bisecting Lompoc and then dividing it the opposite way. I mean, I just could never live with the idea of 9 different ballots in a city. You know, the amount of confusion, lack of representation. There's so many issues that come along with that, and I'm still not convinced that the state's going to take the right steps at this point to keep Lompoc whole. So at least at this level, let's try to keep us whole. So what I wanted to move on to next would be the letter. Thank you, City Administrator, for writing up this letter. I think that it's a good start. I think we need to roll up our sleeves and work on this a little bit tonight. Sure. Well, there's a lot of edits and work that needs to be done, but okay.
What I asked was that we not go into the letter until everybody has a little chance here to talk about it. Councilmember Starbuck.
Yeah, I personally think that on this, that I'm going to go with strength in numbers here with the single map, with single city. And I think for the first time, and I can remember, that we may have an opportunity to include the north part of our valley into our 4th district. I grew up in the 3rd district, and everybody I knew was in the 4th district just because of a river. So the fact that 3rd district runs Ocean Beach, and they're really over here, I don't understand it. I really think that this map 8, that includes Lompoc, Vandenberg Village, Mesa Oaks, Mission Hills, is a win-win, and it gives us a kind of a whole as a community. I think we're working single-purpose committees. We're working all these things within the 93436 area code. I think that it would behoove us to go ahead and have all of our politics in the county in one area also. I think uniformity is our strength there. I don't think that we should put the demographics of Lompoc with the demographics of Isla Vista. It's not compatible. It doesn't work for us. It hasn't worked, and I think the 2nd district deserves it. And I'm going to really support just a single Lompoc.
Councilmember Lingle.
I agree with the council members that spoke before me. I appreciate Ms. Howerton's comment, because I thought about the possibility of having 2 representations as well. But then I also looked at our Assembly District and Senate. We could have the same issue there. We could have 2 senators and 2 Assembly people representing us in Lompoc if we allow them to split our city. I'm against the splitting it for the Assembly. I'm against them splitting it for the Senate, and for the same reason I'm against splitting the city for the Supervisory District. So Ms. Howerton, I appreciate your comments, but I will be supporting not splitting the city.
So. Yeah, I understand. And I see the concept of having 2 people represent you. A lot of people have talked to me about it, and to a small extent we have that now, and opinions vary widely on whether it's been successful or not. I think the other thing is that, from my perspective, is that this is a 10-year decision, and if this were 10 years ago and you asked people in the village or Mesa Oaks or Mission Hills if you might someday like to be part of the city, it was a fairly resounding no. I'm not so sure that's the case anymore, and people ask me questions, and so I think that is a topic of discussion that's coming around. And will it happen in the next 10 years? I don't know. My Ouija board's not that good. But I think it's a good, viable possibility. But I think the other thing that's important, and Councilmember Costa and I were talking about it with regard to the Senate and Assembly when she made her pilgrimage to Fresno, and that was that we, the entire valley, are a group with similar concerns, and just for once it'd be nice to be together. I recall when the issue over closing Surf Beach came along, and that wasn't in the Assembly, a district that our city was in, and so some people perceived that there was a little less effort put in by the person who had that district, and I'm not sure if that's the case or not, but that was a perception. The other thing that came along, we've had other things come along, and where theoretically having two people representing us would have given us that extra clout, and it hasn't come to be. So I guess I'm more in favor of us being one valley and one voting block, because I remember my political science class, and he who's biggest gets heard, he who's smallest gets lost. So, Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, council members, for your comments. So shifting now back to the letter, I, again, thank you, City Administrator Barcelona, for drafting up this letter. I think it's definitely a good start. My one concern is I think it's a little too generic and it needs to be a little more persuasive. I agree that we all, if possible, should be there. I know I'll be there next Tuesday. And maybe at the end when we're done writing the letter, we can decide who says what, so that way there's no any legal, Brown Act conflicts. So we'll do that maybe at the end. But the letter, I think, that they're going to read in front of them still needs to be as persuasive as possible. So the issue here is that there's sort of three main focuses that are concerns. I think the first is keeping Lompoc intact. The second concern is keeping us with similar areas of common interest, as you mentioned. And, of course, the third issue is the no inclusion with Isla Vista. Now, what I would like to state is in all of the cases where Lompoc is kept intact, there is no inclusion of Isla Vista because of the population shift. So by supporting keeping Lompoc intact, you're essentially saying we don't want to be included with Isla Vista. Do I think that we should add a sentence in there? I think that's okay if you guys would like to mention that, but I do think we need to focus all of our energy mostly on the main focus, which is keeping Lompoc intact. And so I do think that means including the maps that we agree to be the most acceptable. I agree with Councilmember Starbuck. Map number 8 would be my first preference. Map number 7 would be my second preference. We're not getting all of the surrounding areas, but we're getting some, and we are intact, so it's kind of, we're getting there. My third option, I do actually really do like map number 11. However, what it does is it splits Goleta, and that's going to be a very controversial issue, so I'd almost rather just stay away from that and just say, hey, look, map number 8 is really what we're looking for. Map number 7 is also acceptable to us, and including that specifically. I know that on the state level, part of what they did ask is that you give suggestions and solutions. So this, I think, is really them saying Lompoc prefers, if we have to, choose a map, this is the one they prefer. Now, maybe we do want to mention in a small sentence, we understand that some of these things may be tweaked, obviously maybe not using the verbiage tweaked, but figuring out something that says we understand that there may need to be some shifts, but in general, these maps are the ones that we find most acceptable. Lastly, and then I'll come back and say something again, I'm sure, is that in 3 times in the letter, sentences state that would keep Lompoc and other county cities whole. I think that we need to take out and other county cities and really hone in on keeping Lompoc whole. So in paragraph 2, the last sentence, in paragraph 3, that would be sentence number 2, and the final sentence, I'll say, yada, 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 that would keep Lompoc and other county cities whole. I would suggest we take out and other county cities. Thank you.
Councilmember Starbuck.
One other thing I'd like to throw in with map 8 while you're throwing things out to make everything a balance on it. One of the things that other than the obvious that this map does for us is it gives every supervisor part of the coast, not like it is done right now. So there is going to be coastal interest by all supervisors. And something that's very important to me also is the representation of agriculture will be done by 4 supervisors with this map instead of the 3 as current. So there is going to be an increase in agricultural influence with that map also.
Are you indicating you'd like to have that those points included in the letter?
No.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mary Lynn. I think that that's a great point. I think that we need to give all the ammunition that we can to support this specific map because they're going on these 16. And I think you made some wonderful comments. You're exactly right that each district has a piece of the coast and each will have some agricultural land as well. So if we want to add in something about why this map is so strong, I would be in favor of adding that as well. We don't want to take the focus away from keeping Lompoc intact, but supporting the map is also something we're doing in order to support the idea of keeping Lompoc intact. So I think that that's definitely acceptable. Thank you.
Councilmember Lingle.
The benefit of speaking last is it's all been said. No, I agree. My favorite map is number 8. Number 7 is my second. I hadn't thought about the comment about every supervisor having ag land and coastline, but I agree with Councilmember Costa that including that in supporting our choice is a good idea. And including, I think it may be heard as something negative, but I think we do need to make a small statement that we have nothing in common with Isla Vista, and not saying anything negative. It's just we have really nothing in common with them. So we would like to not include Isla Vista in our district. Those are my comments.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Marilyn. Yeah, I think citing reasons of topography, geography, you have a sedentary lifestyle of the city of Lompoc versus the transient lifestyle, or that tends to be the transient lifestyle of Isla Vista residents. So citing, but one sentence or two, I think is definitely, I support that completely. So I think, City Administrator, I just wanted to recap really quickly because I know that we all have said a lot in a short period of time. If you had any questions for me and anything that I mentioned.
Well, Mr. Mayor and Council, I have all the comments incorporated, and we'll take care of this tomorrow. But while we're making changes, it was stated Thursday, July 12th. It should be reflected Tuesday, July 12th. So that change will be made.
Just as a thought, having done a lot of letters in my life, have we ever done one where everybody signed it?
No, but that can be done if that's your desire.
I think that would be, obviously we can't speak for Councilmember Costa because she's not here, but if she would, or Martner, yeah, sorry. Yes, Councilmember Smith. If you could contact her and ask her if she'd like to sign. For those of you who don't know, Councilmember Martner had a loss in the family, and so. Anyhow, so I guess what I'd like to do is just have a motion to have the city administrator send a letter, which would be signed by all of us and with the changes that we noted. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Marilyn. As we did with the state redistricting, do you think it would be better for us to present the letter on Tuesday when we arrive to make our statements, or do you think we should send it now?
I think we should do both.
Both?
Okay. Both? Everybody nod up and down?
And Marilyn, my apologies. Do we all just kind of want to play it by ear when we get there and just make comments as we think, or do we need to discuss who is going to take on what issue Tuesday morning?
Let me ask the city attorney a question. Since we've made a decision and we're going to send a letter that's going to cover these points, would we therefore be able to divide those points amongst ourselves when we get prior to getting there?
It would be better if you did that now.
Or could the city
Or just play
administrator
it- or just
divide
play it
those
by
points?
year then, or
and-
just play it by year then.
Yeah, I'm afraid we'll, could the city administrator divide those points and hand them to us?
If she wants that responsibility, she could.
Feeling lucky?
Can you clarify again? What is it that you would like?
We're trying to determine how we're going to speak on this. Rather than spending another 20 minutes figuring it out, I would be in favor of just letting you decide, and whichever one you use next, go, Councilmember Jones.
Mr. Mayor, I believe we will have enough time to speak everything we want to say. There are half dozen issues there. And if it's heard over and over again, I think the multiple times will make a difference. So I think we just go and we speak our minds. That's my opinion.
Okie dokie. So we have, now we need a motion and a second for the city administrator to amend the letter per our discussion.
I'll second that.
I did? Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing no green lights, could we vote, please? And that passes 4-0 with one absent. Yeah. And now for item number 4, I'll be checking out, and I pass my gavel to the Mayor Pro Tem. And just so it's clear why I'm leaving, my wife owns a piece of property adjacent to the proposed Central Avenue extension location.
As we wait for the mayor to leave. Okay, item number 4 is a request for proposal to study State Route 246, San Ynez River Bridge, and Central Avenue Extension feasibility. And for that, we will have Assistant Public Works Director Kevin McCune.
Good evening, council members and the public. In 2008, Measure A was passed by a vast majority of Santa Barbara County voters. In the city of Lompoc, it was over 75% of the voters passed Measure A. In the investment plan for Measure A, there was a project identified to provide, and I wanted to read it to you, to improve the access to Lompoc across the San Ynez River by providing a bridge raised above the flood level with wider shoulders that can safely accommodate vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians. So that was the project description given to the voters. Now you'll notice it's vague on exactly where that is located, and I think it was particularly done that way because we weren't really sure what the best solution was. One solution would be to upgrade the existing 246 alignment where 246 is right now. New bridge, raise the grade, make it meet all the current current Caltrans standards actually. Another solution would be the Central Avenue extension that's in the current general plan and has been the city right-of-way has been built anticipating, and there may be others out there that would be another solution. Whatever the alignment ultimately selected, it will be an expensive, complicated project that will take years to deliver. So the study that SBCAG is proposing attempts to identify the likely potential impacts and constraints of each of these alternatives, including, for instance, archaeological, geographic, traffic, farmland, right-of-way, socioeconomic, hydraulic, biological, cultural, and on and on and on. SBCAG staff would like to get started now, anticipating this project development taking 15 to 20 years. They like to get started now to study the alternatives and prepare a cost-benefit analysis for use by decision makers such as yourself, the Board of Supervisors, the SBCAG Board, Caltrans, and others. The RFP has been prepared, and SBCAG is ready to advertise this RFP, and it is attached to the staff report tonight. Before I think I'm going to stop there, and before I conclude, I wanted to point out what it is not. It's strictly a feasibility study. It's not a general plan amendment. It doesn't do any of the long-range policy decisions that would likely need to happen. All it does is gets you the information you need to help make an informed decision. That's what it attempts to do, at least. So at that, I think I'll stop and answer any questions.
Does council have any questions for Mr. McEwen? Okay, then we will open up for public comment. Anyone from the public have anything to say?
Alice Milligan, I live in Lompoc. I think that we all know that the extension of Central Avenue is just cost prohibitive. And personally, I'd rather see the funds that would be spent on a feasibility study to study a plan that's not feasible be spent on the improvement of Highway 246. To spend money on the extension of Central Avenue just doesn't make sense. Plus, it bypasses Lompoc, and we're already Lompoc is already having its problems in terms of getting tourism and people here in Lompoc and getting development in Lompoc, and I think that would be detrimental to our city. And also, I'm sure all of you have been on Central Avenue at 5 o'clock or noon or whatever. Central Avenue is impacted. Number one, it's not wide enough to accept traffic from the Central Avenue proposed extension. And the intersection at Central Avenue and North 8th Street is horrendous. It takes forever to get across that intersection. So I don't see any good reason to even study the Central Avenue extension. I'm opposed to it.
Thank you, Ms. Milligan.
Joyce Howerton, Lompoc. I totally agree with Alice Milligan, and I know, right? It did freeze over. We years ago, we got literally hundreds and hundreds of signed petitions from people throughout Lompoc. And I actually have a copy of all those, and I didn't have time to dig them out, but if this goes forward, I will. They were signatures from people that live in the Central Avenue corridor, signatures from farmers, signatures from people that have businesses in the old town, in the midtown, and every one of them said, don't do this. You're going to destroy us. There was nobody at that time except for a few individuals who supported it. And I can remember a former public works director for the city of Lompoc who said to me, oh, don't worry about this. It's the biggest expansion of the river. They'll never do it. Nobody will ever be able to afford to do it. And I agree with that. So I think it's a waste of money to even study it. Let's look at where the money could be better spent. And I agree, upgrading the bridge on 246. When I see people walking down that bridge and it's foggy and traffic's moving fast, I just think, what's going to happen next? So, I think that the council needs to be realistic. The Central Avenue extension has been put to bed probably 20 times. Let's just get rid of it. It's not going to happen. We can't afford it. It's not good for Lompoc. Tonight earlier we had the Rotary Club that donated a clock, this very cool clock for the Old Town area. What good's that going to do if there's nobody there, if they're all at the other end of town? So I would encourage you to let it go and use the money where it can actually do some good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Holton. Does anyone else like to say anything?
Mayor Pro Tem and City Council, it's kind of a shame these two items were boxed together. I had the opportunity to serve the city represented at the SBCAG board. One of the things I wanted to do was to get the Robinson Bridge replaced. I keep thinking, the third time it'll be a charm. Most people don't know that that's not the original bridge. The original bridge is probably 200 yards further upstream from there, and they made it rather low and a couple of good winters, and it was gone, and they built the bridge that they put in there now. When I was on the council, I kind of supported the Central Avenue because the right-of-way has already been taken there, and I wanted to protect that right-of-way. Some of that property was taken, and that's a story for another time, but I don't like takings. But anything we can do to get that Robinson Bridge replaced, I know Caltrans spent some time on trying to modify it or something, but I just don't see it. I think it needs to be replaced. Now, there was a time 2 years ago when Lompoc was blocked off. The Highway 1 was closed to Las Cruces. 246 was closed. Santa Lucia Canyon was closed. So we actually had, if you wanted to get out of town, you had to go down and jump the railroad. That was the only thing that was running. So I don't know. I see both sides of the Central Avenue. A good all-weather bridge across there would assure us at least one bulletproof escape route out of Lompoc if we needed to evacuate the town really quickly. And that's my positive on it. Bypassing H Street, I really don't know. It'd be really hard for me to say that it would or wouldn't. I do know that we've talked a lot about getting trucks out of the center of town, and if Central went through, a lot of the trucks would probably take Central Avenue out of town, not through the center of town. So you can, that one's, I can talk either side of that one. But the Robinson Bridge, we need to do something. If our recommendation is to split this up and look at them separately, so be it. But I was out one time walking my dogs coming out of the river, and I saw a really deadly potential accident coming up, and it really scared me. And I thought right then I dedicated myself to any way I can to get that bridge widened and replaced and get a pedestrian lane in there. So we need to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schuyler. Would anyone else like to speak?
I don't have anything new to add, but Alice Milligan and Joyce Howerton spoke very well.
Please state your name, please.
Oh, Anita Friedman, Lompoc. That's right, you can't read that thing long distance. So Alice and Joyce already covered the points I was going to speak, so I'd just like to add my voice to that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Ella Gale, Lompoc residents. I'd like to just make a comment to the council. I moved here about 10 years ago. I had no idea I would be locked into this place in case of an emergency. It really doesn't make sense to put people at risk. So I really don't care where you put the bridge, but put a bridge that we can get in and out of. Thank you.
Thank you.
Art Hibbets, 1251 East Highway 246. I think the issue of the Central Avenue extension has been talked about enough. It seems crazy to put something on the map that you just know isn't going to happen in a reasonable length of time. So why not ask for something and put your request on something that's maybe possible in our lifetime? And that would be what many people spoke of, is fixing that bridge that was built in '39. It's amazing somebody has not got, poor English, hasn't been killed on that bridge walking back and forth the park or the homeless facility, So that would be the first thing I would ask the planners to look at. Now, I'm going to have a big battle when they talk about lifting the roadway up for 1 mile, you know, from Bob Campbell's past our ranch down to Sweeney Road. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. All you guys have lived around here, that road occasionally has water running across it. They close it because, not because you can't drive through it, but people apparently can't slow down when there's water on the road. And so they close it for safety reasons. I drive through it every day. I have to. There's no problem. So, you know, we'll fight that battle when it comes, but you've got to remember, if you keep talking about Central Avenue Extension, the state told us very clearly we do not do duplicate roads. So if you want Central Avenue to be a state highway, that will be it, and they'll abandon 246 from in front of Bob Campbell's to the city. So that means if we want that bridge improved, it'll be either the city or the county, and that's a big deal. That's not going to happen. So I would just, the county has said no to the Central Avenue in their general plan for 20 or 30 or 40 years. At various times the city has said no. I would just X that one off, concentrate on the most pressing and doable thing, which would be fix what we've got. The other thing I'd say to you is, it annoys me that we talk about these grandiose projects with Caltrans. They cannot even fix Highway 1 from 7th Street to 8th Street. You guys drive over it from the front of the hospital to the railroad track. It's like driving, I mean, it's a disaster. Am I right? Why can't they spend some money on that? Why are we talking about studies and grandiose plans in these days? Let's fix what we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hibbets.
Paul Rosso, Lompoc. Never, since I've been in Lompoc, have I agreed with Joyce. But I actually was one of the people who signed the petition, and I remember exactly where I signed it. I signed it at George Taylor's Union 76, which was at A and Ocean, and he felt he was going to go out of business. I live on the south side of town. I go to Toyota, and I really feel all these businesses that we go to right now would go out of business if Central Avenue was extended. I also was trapped one day in Lompoc, and I actually went to Santa Maria Clark Avenue I had to go fly out of town to get to LAX. Had to go all the way up to Clark Avenue because 246 was closed and Route 1 was closed. I think the Robinson Bridge should be improved and all of 246 raised. I've been on that so many times when it's been flooded, and that's very important. And not the Central Avenue extension, because that would be a tremendous bridge and highly costly. And I'd like to see, in at least my lifetime, Robinson Bridge completed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. My name is Janice Keller. Mr. McCune mentioned about this being in the general plan. Well, the recommendation from the Planning Commission before the 1997 general plan was enacted, the recommendation from the Planning Commission was to not have the Central Avenue Extension Bridge in there, and it got put in by the then council. So, as people have mentioned, it's gone back and forth and back and forth. And I would just like to point out another good reason to abandon the Central Avenue Extension and not even study it any further is our hospital. We built our hospital where it is, and access to that hospital is most easily made along 246 and across Robinson Bridge or its subsequent reincarnation, whatever that might be. So please don't go forward with even the RFP on this. It's a waste of time and money. And studying the Central Avenue Extension was just going to slow down the process of getting those improvements done on Robinson Bridge, which might be able to be done sooner if they're not held up by the other process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keller.
Yes, Mary Saladino, resident of Lompoc. I feel strongly that if you were to extend Central Avenue and bypass the city would die even more than it is currently in economic times. So please don't do that.
Thank you.
Dave Pierce, I'm a Lompoc resident. I pretty much agree with what's been said. It's amazing to me that this has continued to reappear after all these years. I mean, the consensus of that general plan way back was that it didn't belong in Lompoc, and we shouldn't have a crosstown. We shouldn't extend the Central Avenue in a way that would cause that bridge to be built. So, in fact, I worry that by discussing it, it does harm, because we're telling the merchants along Ocean Avenue and along South H Avenue that they're concerned about their economic well-being is something the City Council isn't really paying attention to. And I think you give them the wrong message by including this. And so I would say encourage the study to not study the Central Avenue extension and dissipate energies on something that we know is incompatible with Lompoc's structure. And let's find out how to use those energies and that funding to really move ahead on the Robinson Bridge project. And so my comment would be to do the affirmative thing and remove the Central Avenue extension and explain to them that we really do need the Robinson Bridge attended to, and to use the energies fully on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on the issue? Okay, seeing no one rise, we'll bring it back to the council. Councilmember Starbuck.
Well, it's no secret I've been against this from day one. I've got to tell you, I'm also against the lifting of 246 because I happen to know that when McLaughlin Road washed out, the only way I could get to town was down 246 in front of Mr. Hibbett's and Mr. Campbell's place, and it was always drivable, even in '69 when I went across the Robinson Bridge one car at a time. The same people that want to lift 246 are the same ones that want to put a roundabout out there. So, I mean, think about where this is all coming from. I got to say that there's $300,000 for this study allocated. I could really see it being used on a 72-year-old bridge called the Robinson Bridge that isn't even adaptable to foot traffic or bicycle traffic. I tell you, Mr. McKeon, I think that when we get done here and it's all said and done, that the study of the Robinson Bridge with the $300,000 would be a much better use of taxpayer money than looking at the stale crossing of the fourth bridge out of Lompoc. And like I say, that's where I'm going to stand on this.
Councilmember Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I actually had some questions now that we're having this discussion. I'm going to agree with Councilmember Starbuck and the members of the public in that, if possible, I would like to take the language out of the RFP that reference multiple instances to the Central Avenue extension as a possibility. I know that the $300,000 is part of the strategic plan. That decision's already made, so that's going to be used for a feasibility study. And of course, I know that in a feasibility study, you have to look at the feasibility of multiple options, one of which I understand you're saying just one option is this option, but there's a clear consensus that we don't even want that option looked into. Is that okay to take the language out of the SBCAG request for proposals to really try to hone in that focus of the feasibility study on replacing the Robinson Bridge?
Right. What I would recommend you do is, if you don't want Central Avenue to be studied, what I would recommend you do is ask SBCAG not to move forward with the RFP. Because it's in our general plan right now, I would wait until our new general plan process is complete, and then let's revisit what it is we want them to study. Because I would be sending them a mixed message. It's in our general plan right now, but yet verbally we're telling them not to. So what we would recommend you do is just ask them to shelve this to a future date, let our own general plan process move forward, and then either bring it up or don't bring it up. But I mean, I don't see a lot of value in doing a lot of studying for one alternative at this point. The construction is far enough away that For instance, any CEQA document or any EIR that's done now would be out of date at that point. So we probably would be better holding our money until later when we can start a process that would end with construction and not kind of be out of date. The only reason we were going forward with this now is because there was a debate about what are the feasible alternatives. Unless there's another alternative that I hear besides Central Avenue, I don't hear any other feasible alternatives besides the existing alignment. So,
thank you for your comments. If I could just continue, Mr. Chair. I definitely understand, especially now that you brought up the idea of CEQA, if we are using this money and we want to use it judiciously to pay for the CEQA, to go through the process and then have it become stale and have to do it again would be I think most likely a poor decision. Now, do I want this shelved? Not necessarily. I mean, this is sort of one of those things where you want this to keep moving on. But as you mentioned, which is also in the staff report, that we're looking out at, I mean, what we're, construction not until 2034, 35. And that's nothing that we have control over changing. Is that correct?
that's correct. That was where it was programmed in the investment plan. We can't change that. So we can't change the date. So really, this was more of a this was a kind of get the ball rolling on, get everybody behind an alternative that works, get the county's general plan in alignment with the city's general plan, get Caltrans to start looking long-range studies. If there's only one alternative that everyone supports, then there's no really, we already have all the same, we already have the alignment, so we don't need to do those kind of preliminary analysis and alternatives.
So then, is there any way, and this is again, I guess, for council, to say that this is shelved until the date certain, which would be the meeting immediately following the approval of the general plan update?
We can amend the general plan 4 times a year. Maybe we should do one right now.
That's actually a good question. When are we looking to, you may not know this question, City Administrator, do we have any idea when we will be seeing the general plan update? Do we have any idea when that's going to be coming? I understand we cut staff. Of course, we just made that even longer from now. But
well, it's my understanding that it's being reviewed by the Planning Commission and should be completed to come back to council by late fall.
So I think it's coming soon enough where we don't necessarily need to go through the amendment process, which takes a considerable period of time as well. So let's just try to be sure. Let's just try to be sure that the general plan update makes the changes that we want to make to stay consistent with what we're going to say. Bring this back the meeting immediately after, and then send this off at that time. Would that make sense?
If the council prefers. Again, once Central Avenue is off the table, I don't know that there's a need to study anything at this point. I would think it would be better to hold that money for environmental and design, starting at whatever year that SBCAG programs that process start to deliver a project in 2037. That isn't right now. That isn't next year. That's a few years ahead still.
Well, that was the project development in 2027, 28.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's
2027. So we want to shelve this till 2027.
No, SBCAG will come up with a plan to deliver the project in 2027. So they need to back into the process and start environmental, whatever, 5 or 6 years, 10 years. I don't know what it is, but it isn't next year or this year. It's a year in the future to start that analysis.
So then we would shelve it until that
process
time
would start, yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Starbuck.
Yeah, just real quick. So this $300,000, what happens with it for the study?
That's a great question. $8 million was programmed for the project. $300,000 was pulled out and brought up in today's year to do something with the project. I would certainly recommend our representative there's a meeting tomorrow on the North County Sub-Regional to SBCAG is asking Lompoc to provide comments on this RFP. I would recommend that be addressed tomorrow at the meeting is if this RFP doesn't go out, that $300,000 be rolled back into the $8 million and kind of shelved and kind of cubbyholed for our project. I don't see how it can happen any other way than that.
Yeah, who attends the meeting?
I'll be there tomorrow.
You will be there, okay. When I'm looking at the staff report here on the back, it refers to the 246 San Ynez River Bridge. Do you think we could just talk them into believing it's the Robinson Bridge? No.
Any other comments from council? Mr. McHugh and I do have one question. It was concerning the $300,000. Now, I realize in a big picture like this, $300,000 is really nothing. In your opinion, is it even worth addressing SBCAG tomorrow and seeing if they can take some of that money and create some sort of a footbridge across that? Because I don't know who's mentioned it, that they were surprised that we haven't had a fatality on that bridge, and now we're going to be waiting another 25 years. Without raising the bridge, without replacing it, some sort of a walking bridge or walking path across that would be very, very helpful for this community. In your opinion, is that even worth discussing tomorrow?
I think it is worth discussing, yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, it could be similar to what we have over H Street. Maybe not quite that grandiose. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion.
Go ahead.
That the City Council requests that the RFP be shelved until a future date, and that the $300,000 that was budgeted to be used for a feasibility study be asked to be used for a footbridge, and if not, rolled back into the entire construction amount to be used at a later date.
And do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? And let's vote. Okay, that passes 3 with 2 abstentions. 1 abstain, 1 absent. Thank you.
All right. Now returning. You need to write in results for me. Where are we at? No, we got oral communications. Okay. And now we will have oral communications, your opportunity to talk to us for 5 minutes on any subject. Come on down.
Mike Mendeck, City of Lompoc. Now, I was in here a couple weeks ago. We were chatting, and previous city councils said that when times got better, it would trickle on down. And when we were talking, you said times were getting a little bit better. Not much, but a little bit. But I'm not feeling the love. Nothing's trickling down. And I'm a single income family, and I got 3 kids, and I've been trying to get them jump started in life, putting them through school, paying auto insurances, gas, food, trying to help them out and everything. And it seems that for the last few years, instead of the council bargaining with the union and coming to agreement, you guys have been taking, really not giving. We're not asking for much. I kind of like, status quo. Because the days off that I get, I can do things. I can go other places and do other things. But it's coming around where you guys are just keep taking and you're not working with us. And over previous years, the union has always taken smaller wage increases so the city would pay our retirement. The other unions, they've taken bigger wage increases and they pay their own retirement. But the Teamsters always did small ones so the city would pay it. And now you're wanting us to pay our own retirement, but you're not increasing our wages or anything. If you increase my wage 8%, I'd be more than happy to pay 8% of my retirement. But it's not, I'm struggling. I got a lot of coworkers that are struggling. And, the 13 furlough days, I didn't like them. I got used to them. I like them now. And a lot of my coworkers like them because they have little kids and stuff. They could save on daycare, summertime. They don't have to worry about it. Their days off. To take furlough days to help with their kids and stuff. And I like my 13 furlough days. And I like to keep them. And you want me to come back to, to work to pay for my retirement? Why don't you just take the money I'm not working with and pay my retirement? It could work. We can pencil it out together. I can see it happening. No? Come on, work with me here. And we've been running without a contract since December. I mean, it's been going smooth. You know, how come we can't just stay status quo? That's all I'm asking for, status quo. Let's run another 2 years, see if it gets better. If it doesn't get better, then hey, let's look at this. But right now, if things are getting better, let's just stay status quo. I like it. I'm sure you guys like it. We all get along. We're all happy. Come on, let's work here.
Okay, just so you know, I can't answer you because we agreed as a council that we wouldn't engage in this. So it's not that I don't want to, because you can see the words on my lips, but we just can't do this. And that's kind of where we're at.
Okay, council, let's speak up. Status quo. Hey, all in favor? Ayes have it. No, but it benefit me. It benefited a lot of my union brothers and sisters and everything. You know, it's tough out there. And if you guys keep taking, it's only going to get tougher. You know, I'm on a boat that's sinking right now, and I could use all the help I can get. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Alice Milligan, City of Lompoc. Message to Councilman Linger: do not let them take that $300,000 and put it back into the SBK pot. Leave it for Lompoc. That's my message.
Yes, Ross.
I know this item is not on the agenda, but I'd like to address the issue of RDA raid by the state of California. I'm really concerned about losing that close to $1 million we have in RDA monies to fund the state budget. I hope, and I know that the council is being very proactive on this, and I want you to fight to keep that money here in Lompoc. We need it here. I know that the state of California is in dire straits, but that's they're doing. We want to keep Lompoc, and we want to keep that money in Lompoc. We really need it here. Thank you.
We'll be working on their blackmail offer.
Will Schuyler, Lompoc, got 2 items. First off, on your consent item number 12, the lease with VJ Rock, I believe he performs a very valuable service to the community, and I'd certainly like to see that renewed. Several of you have businesses and stuff. I hope you took and read the contract. Does it really take that much verbiage to make an agreement to go down the river and pull sand? I sometimes wonder where we're going with some of this stuff. And the other is on the SBCAG. I want everybody to know and understand that when SBCAG does these projects, they don't happen overnight. They take years. When I was representing the city on the SBCAG board and I put in for the Robinson Bridge, they told me that nothing would happen within 13 years. It would take that long to sit in the hopper before anything would even start, any type of study or prospective study and stuff. And I'm really kind of a little bit disappointed tonight that you didn't maybe want to put a little, because to me, all you've done is put it off another 13 years in the future. And I don't think the bridge is going to make it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Seeing no one rise, we'll close oral communication, come back to the council. And is there anyone who'd like to withdraw an item from the consent calendar? Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. I would like to pull consent calendar item 10 for additional discussion, please.
Okay. Council, consent item number 10 is removed at this time. And are there any other items? And hold that thought. I wish to confess that I did not read the journal, and therefore, if there is an item on there which is payable to any of my businesses, I hereby recluse myself from that item, but I don't believe there are. And having said that, is there anyone that would like to make a motion with regard to the consent calendar? Councilmember Costa?
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. I move that council accept the consent calendar, except for item 10, which has been pulled for additional discussion. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on? Oh, I'm sorry, a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on the consent calendar? Seeing no lights lit, could we vote, please? And that passes 4-0 with one absent. And now to unfinished business. The City Council consideration of a Planning Commission recommendation of a text amendment. And Lucille.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. This is a continued item, continued from the council's June 21st meeting. The Planning Commission had recommended amendments to the municipal code and the zoning ordinance sections that establish new appeal procedures sections and that consolidate multiple appeal references throughout the zoning ordinance for the purpose of simplifying the appeal process for the community. The council had held a public hearing and considered the language. They directed staff to work with the city attorney and to return with language that was more user-friendly in the general appeal section. That language has been provided to the council this evening, and what we've done is to provide the new language, which is in italics as it is proposed, and the language that was or is existing, and that is has the strikeouts through it, so you can see what the changes are. Also noted in the staff report is the fact that we have looked and caught there was one reference to the appeal that was left with calendar days. All three references to the appeal timeline have now been adjusted to reflect the Planning Commission recommendation that 10 business days be allowed from a decision to the appeal period. And that concludes my staff report, and I'm available for any questions.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mary Lynn. Thank you very much. This is a great job. I really appreciate you noting the calendar days to business days as I requested. You also did the strikeout version and the new version, which I requested. So I really appreciate all the work. Just a little bit more retooling on it, I think, made a really big difference. So I want to say great job, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else at this time? Thank you. And we'll open this for oral communication. Is there anyone out there left among you 200 or 300 people that would like to talk about this? No. Seeing no one rise, we'll bring it back to council for discussion. Personally, I'm satisfied with it, and I think a good job was done. And I'd entertain a motion in a second if there's no discussion. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. Do I have to read all of the recommendations?
Just refer to the recommendations in the staff report.
Yeah, all four?
3 and 4.
3 and 4, okay. I move that the City Council adopt the negative declaration prepared for the text amendment and direct staff to file a notice of determination and waive further reading and introduce ordinance number 1569, parens 11, approving text amendment TA 11-03, amending the city's zoning ordinance section 1.32.010 of the municipal code and establish chapter 17.006 appeal procedures in the zoning ordinance.
And a second?
I'll second all that.
And it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on this from the council? Seeing no green lights lit, can we vote, please? And that passes 4-0 with one absence. Did you need to get another tape? Okay. Just being reminded of something. Okay, and now we'll move on to item 14. Approval of resolution 5730.11, authorizing the establishment of a safe surrender baby program and designating the Lompoc fire stations as a safe surrender site. Thank you so very much for doing this. It looks like a great thing. and our acting fire chief, Jeff States.
Evening, Mayor, Council. Thank you. The staff recommendation is that you approve the resolution 573011 authorizing this. Some of the background, this law was actually passed and went into effect January of 2001, and then Governor Schwarzenegger extended it permanently to January 1st, 2006. In 2007, what the governor did, he cleaned up some of the language. Prior to that, the Board of Supervisors had to give the approval for the local government to have the authority to have a safe surrender site. The county EMS was going to bring that before the Board of Supervisors. It was one of those things that got dropped. Then the language was cleaned up. We had a presentation in January, February this year at a county fire chiefs meeting that was brought to us that all the 7 departments in the county are going towards either their council or their board to designate all the fire stations in the county as a safe surrender. That's part of the background. The financial cost is only $150 for the sign. That gives us 2 kits per station. And actually, the emergency rooms have been able to accept this ever since the law was passed. We just wanted to make sure all the fire stations in the county could do this.
Any questions for the chief? Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, as you stated, the local emergency rooms and actually do take part in this. We accept the children. And I have a copy here of the local healthcare district's policy on it. And there's several things. I just want to make sure that you probably are. I just want to make sure that the fire departments are aware of it. We make every attempt to get any medical history on the parents before, as parents or whomever is dropping the baby off, in case that is needed later on. And we also attach a bracelet on the baby, some form of identification, because there are instances where they may want to back up and say, we want the baby back. And you'd have to make sure you give it back to the proper child. So what I'd like to do is, and I only have 1 copy, so we can make copies for everyone, but unless you already have a policy that covers all this, I'd like to give this to the city clerk and maybe try to incorporate some of this into your policy in accepting the baby, because a lot of these things are important when you do accept the child, if you can give medical history or anything. So, or do we have a policy on that right now?
We don't have an official one yet. County Health has a policy that we're going to mirror their policy.
Okay.
And the kits actually come with you open the kit, it has the 2 bracelets. They're color-coded, numbered. They go on the child, go with the parent, and then they take a history.
Okay, so it's all covered then?
Yes.
And we probably, the healthcare district probably utilized the similar policy than when we wrote ours, so.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions at this time? Seeing none, thank you, Chief. This is public comment. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this subject? Seeing no one rise, we'll close public comment and come back to the council. So I'm going to have the first bite. Yeah, this is great. I read about it a while back. I feel strongly about it. Anything we can do to make a child safe and give the parents an alternative, I am surely in favor of. And if there's anyone want to discuss this at all? Nope. Seeing no one, could we have a motion, please?
No, I'll go ahead and move that council adopt resolution 5730-11 authorizing the establishment of safe surrender site and designating the city of Lompoc fire stations as safe surrender sites.
And a second. Councilmember Costa?
I'll second.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on this subject? Seeing no lights lit, could we vote, please? That passes 4-0 with 1 absent. And now we'll move back to item 10 from the consent calendar. And this will be from our police chief.
Thank you, Mayor, members of City Council, those of you in the audience, and those of you at home. It's my honor to be before you this evening to discuss this item. And I'll begin by reading some excerpts from the staff report submitted in November 17th, 2009. The Lompoc Police Department has continually sought to address gang-related violence and graffiti in our community from every angle. The pervasive nature of this problem requires the use of prevention, education, intervention, and focused enforcement. The department has utilized a wide array of strategies, including community forums, neighborhood watch programs, anti-gang education in our local schools, the gang injunction, graffiti abatement programs, school resource officers, parole visitation programs, gang association warrants, gang suppression patrols and sweeps, and recreational options for youth, such as police activities leagues, as well as working with the Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, and Lompoc's Parks and Recreation Department, among others. The Lompoc Police Department continually seeks innovative community policing options to embrace the community, to enhance the quality of life in our community that facilitate a family and business-friendly atmosphere. In this vein, the department developed a plan to implement public cameras in certain areas of the city to deter and detect certain types of criminal activity. The authorization to purchase a closed-circuit television system, or CCTV, before you this evening is the final step in a 2-year project that was approved by the City Council on November 17, 2009. The public camera project is part of a larger effort to address graffiti, vandalism, gang activity, thefts from motor vehicles, and other crimes that occur in public places. The proposal before you provides for the implementation of public cameras at various locations in the city. It is anticipated that at least 2 of the locations will be fixed locations. Originally proposed are Central Avenue at H Street and Ocean Avenue at H Street. I've had many questions before by people in the audience before I came before you this evening. It's important to point out these are not enforcement cameras. These are not red light cameras. These are not ones that snap your picture as you drive by and then issue you a ticket sometime down the road. These are strictly static surveillance cameras. The remaining cameras are removable and can be moved throughout the city to target certain areas where graffiti vandals are practicing their trade, and they do move from place to place throughout the city, where gang activity is cropping up its head, and other crimes. Now, the law allows for the use of cameras, and we have used mobile platforms, and static cameras have been used for surveillance by law enforcement for decades. Cameras are commonly used in public areas such as public parks, pedestrianized streets in city centers, like closed-off malls, outdoor parking areas, residential neighborhoods, business districts, throughout public transportation systems nationwide. When the department originally received the funding for this project, staff researched several California cities, namely Ripon, Folsom, El Cerrito, Seal Beach, Fresno, Desert Hot Springs, and there are many, many, many others in the state of California that use public cameras. Many law enforcement agencies across the country, some of the bigger cities, New York, Dallas, New Orleans, Cincinnati, etc., also use public cameras. In fact, they've solved homicides using public cameras. The benefits of public cameras listed by the United States Department of Justice Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services include crime prevention when you let the public know that there are cameras present in the community. We don't plan on keeping a secret that there are cameras deployed in our community, and so that demotivates people, potential offenders. It reduces fear of crime. It aids police investigations, provides more rapid medical assistance. For example, if we had a camera that was monitoring H and Central, rather than waiting for an officer to get on scene to see how bad the crash is, a dispatcher can look and see the extent of the crash and determine what resources might be needed even before the officer gets there, or the need to request for additional officers to respond. And then there's the diffusion of benefits, which when you put up a camera in a certain area, it tends to quell crime in an area larger than what the camera is, the view of the camera. The Lompoc Police Department plans on conducting public awareness campaign, making the residents of Lompoc aware of the use of public cameras. We're talking about it in our our quadrant meetings throughout the city as a deterrent to criminal activity. We also plan on letting people know through the media outlets such as the newspaper and the department and city websites. Now, the United States Constitution protects the public from an invasion of privacy and unreasonable searches in public places where there is no reasonable expectation of privacy. I'm sorry, let me back up. In public places where there is no reasonable expectation of privacy, such as this room, the use of public cameras have been found acceptable under the law. The United States Department of Justice Video Surveillance of Public Places Response Guide, which is what they issue to police departments, states that the reasonable expectations of privacy tend to be subjective, but for the purpose of simple video, not audio, surveillance of public space, the use of CCTV would appear to be on solid ground constitutionally. The purpose of the Lompoc Public Safety Camera System is to augment what we already have, to enhance our efforts to provide a safe public environment, to conduct business, transit public spaces, and enjoy our neighborhoods with a minimal fear of crime. And the intent of the system is to lead to the rapid identification of those responsible for crimes like vandalism and graffiti that are committed in view of a camera, and to deter those who, but for the presence of a camera, might seize an opportunity to commit these crimes. Likewise, as I mentioned earlier, prevention classes, the gang injunction, bicycle patrols, none of these are a silver bullet that will end all crime in our community. But this is just yet another tool and will enhance our abilities to police Lompoc. Public cameras will not prevent the actions of a person who is determined to violate people's property, rights, or freedoms. However, they have proven to be an effective deterrent and enhance the ability of investigators to identify and apprehend offenders. The proposed public camera system has been approved by the United States Department of Justice. The Office of Community-Oriented Policing is also providing full funding, so it's free, to deter graffiti and gang activity in Lompoc. So I request that you approve this purchase so that the project can be completed. And then lastly, in summary, I would state that this project is tied to other pieces of this effort. This is a $400,000 grant. This piece of the grant is $171,000. The other pieces of it include a vehicle that has surveillance equipment in it. Another piece of it is the cost of overtime for conducting stakeouts for graffiti vandals and gang sweeps and targeted enforcement, as well as building the backbone and the storage space and the servers for not only the cameras that will be deployed in the city, but also our in-car video cameras that are linked to the same system. So we have cameras in our patrol cars that arguably are just a mobile version of what we're going to put up. So I'm available for any questions that you might have.
Councilmember Lingle. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the risk of being arrested as I walk out, I want to correct you on one thing. They're not free. They're just no charge to the city of Lompoc.
That's correct. They are not free. They are.
Okay.
The money would go to some other city.
There you go. I do have one question. I believe I know the answer. You said they're fixed cameras.
Correct.
So someone at City Hall, if they see something going on, do they have any way of manipulating the camera, follow a suspect, zoom in on the suspect?
That capability will be in dispatch.
Oh, really? They can?
Yes.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay.
The law, the question was asked of me earlier, are we going to be peeking in people's windows and in their backyards? The answer is no. This is for public areas only. It's for common streets, parks. Some of the cameras, the ones that we put up that are going to be static, for instance, we thought it would be beneficial for many parts of our city to put a camera at H and Ocean because, and then make access to the website, the city, so that residents could log in and see what's going on at Old Town Market, et cetera. But at the same time, the camera is buffering and it's got some storage ability so that if there's a crash there, we can back up the camera, see what happened in the crash. So it'll serve dual purposes, and same thing with the Central and H proposal. The other cameras, they're going to be affixed to poles, but they're readily movable. If you have an operation or you've got a criminal activity in a certain area, those can be used to support, like graffiti in Art Alley. We could move a camera into that alley to see who's doing the graffiti.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, Councilmember Lingle, because that was the first thing that came to my mind, I have to admit, is that nothing in life is free. And so, to some, this is actually, there's a cost to this, and that's the cost of certain freedoms. Now, you're correct in that the First Amendment and Fourth Amendment concerns have been taken care of in the courts already, and they have made the determination that this indeed doesn't violate those amendment rights. And I think it's important, you're correct, that we are emphasizing that the taping is on public streets only and not into private homes or residences. But the reason I pulled this item was because I wanted the members of the public to recognize that I'm taking this very seriously, and that I think that an overextension of government is a bad idea. Now, not to say that I think that preventing crime isn't paramount, because to me, the safety of the residents is. What I would like to say is, in the research that I've done, I'll cite, for example, in the California Research Bureau State Library, an article named Public Video Surveillance, Is It an Effective Crime Prevention Tool? That specifically mentions that some of the feedback is actually mixed. There's some mixed reviews on whether or not this is actually an effective tool, because some of it is anecdotal. So you really need to look at the numbers here. It may prevent crime in one area, and then another area it may actually increase in crime. So there's a lot to look at with these cameras. Do I think that they're going to be positive assets to the city? I do. However, my concern is the effectiveness. As you all know, I'm very concerned with statistical data. So how do things quantitatively make a difference? I don't want to just assume that this is going to have a positive impact. I want to see that it's going to have a positive impact. So the reason I pulled this was because I wanted to request that we have maybe a review. So maybe that be 1 year out, or however long you feel, Chief Dabney, would be sufficient period of time where we can actually quantify those results. And to be quite frank, if we don't see any serious changes, I would prefer that the program's discontinued. I think that we want to give them multiple chances, and as I said, crime prevention, the safety of residents is paramount. However, I don't want it to go unsaid that we need to see if this is actually going to have an effect, and not just make the citizens feel that Big Brother is watching. Thank you.
Councilmember Starbuck.
Chief Dabney, we currently have some of these cameras in cars and all that. I mean, they do currently work right now, right?
Yes. Well, we do have cameras in our corporate yards. Our transit buses are having cameras installed. The new transit centers propose to have public cameras for the safety of the occupants that are waiting for buses or disembarking from buses. So there's more than just our department that are using cameras of this nature. And in response to Councilmember Costa, it's very difficult to measure crimes that don't occur. We could give a report that we haven't caught anybody in this neighborhood, and does that say that the cameras are working? Could, maybe. As you said, much of the data is anecdotal. We do not have the money to put a camera on every corner or a police officer on every corner. I don't think we want to live in that kind of a community. But by the same token, to the extent that had we the technological resources now, we would be using it whenever we would be have a need to ensure the safety of our residents. So this isn't a maybe it's mistitled in the staff report a citywide surveillance system. This is a limited number of cameras that will be used for specific operations, and the thrust of the original program that was submitted back in 2009 was for graffiti and gang activity.
Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand Councilmember Acosta's concern. However, it's hard to even walk into any store in these days without being under video surveillance, and those stores are not there to protect me, they're there to protect them. These cameras are actually there to protect the public. And I agree with the chief, it's going to be awful difficult. We all look at the crime statistics, and from year to year they go up and down. That doesn't mean that if we put a camera out there today and the crime statistics go down, that doesn't mean that the cameras are working. If they go up, it doesn't mean that the crime statistics are working either. So I agree it's going to be hard to quantify that. I have no problem with us coming back a year from now just for fun to see what has happened. But I don't know if we're going to really be able to quantify whether the cameras are working. I love the idea. I don't mind being on camera out there. But I really believe it is another tool that we allow our police officers to use to help prevent crime. We've had the store owners requesting us place these cameras in their store, the ones that are being hit by graffiti all the time. And I believe some of those are going to be some of the top candidates for this. So I'm not really in favor of coming back in a year, but if that's the wish of the council, I have no problem with that either. So.
You want another turn? Okay. Councilmember Jones.
If you get some really funny ones, can I see them?
No.
Okay, my turn. Philosophically, I absolutely hate the idea. You know, I don't need any more government help in my life. But I remember 20 years ago getting some broken, used stereos from Alpine to put in cars that the police department then took out and allowed people to steal the broken, used stereos so they could put them in jail because we had a stereo theft epidemic. And I think there was a camera in that car, as I recall, but I think it had film and worked off a photo sensor. So I guess there's a point where for the safety of the community, we give up something. So I guess I'm ready to do this, perhaps a little less willingly than some other people. And as to coming back at some point in the future, yeah, I think that's a good idea. Chief, are you going to retire prior to a year from now? No. Because I'm going to change my recommendation if you're going to retire sooner than a year, because then you'll have to report back before you retire. And I think what I would like you to come and look us in the eye, because I believe you to be an extremely truthful man, and say, you know, based on what we've seen, we've caught some people and we've made some problems go away and we think it's working. Or, yeah, you know, I don't know. In which case we'll probably tell you to turn them off and park them. And that's the way I feel. Councilmember Lingle.
I think you just answered my question. I was going to ask what we intend on doing in a year with the report. I personally would not be in favor of turning the cameras off in a year if we say that crime has actually increased, or if we say that there's been no change. I don't believe we can make that judgment that the cameras are not working. So I'm concerned with what we're going to do with that information. Is it just going to further confuse people? I just don't know what we're going to do with that. I will be, a year from now, it'll be interesting to see what it is, but in a year from now, if it is not a positive report, I can tell you right now, I'd probably not be for removing the cameras.
Well, we'll find out a year from now. And I think my outlook would be that the chief would give us his professional opinion on what we should do, and I assume we would act then based on his professional opinion. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Marilyn. Councilmember Lingo, I would ask you this way. If a crime prevention tool is non-quantifiable, how can you justify using any crime prevention tool? Do you see my point? If you can't see a connection between a tool that's being used and the effect that it has, implementing a tool at all, there's no grounds for doing it. So my point is maybe we're not looking at crime statistics in general, but maybe we're looking at, okay, how many times did the surveillance assist in an arrest? How many times did it, you know what I mean? Those kinds of specifics that I think are quantifiable. I understand that in relation to the general, it may be difficult. But I'm going to, take a very strong stance against what you stated, which is that in a year from now, even with the data saying that possibly they may not be helping in what they're supposed to be helping, you'd still allow it to continue. So I would just, if all I can get tonight is to have him come back in a year and have him discuss it, I would very much appreciate that, and we can discuss this at that time. But I would just ask that we take that into consideration, and I think that for the public that has been the few public comments that I have received on this and their concern, that's really why I wanted to pull the item in the first place. Thank you.
Who's next? Councilmember Lingle.
Councilmember Costa, I'm sure you will get your request because I'll go along with it. But I do want to address one of your comments. Let's say Chief Dabney comes back in a year and shows where he has apprehended 16 criminals by the use of the camera. That does not tell us that the camera was what apprehended that criminal. They may have been able to apprehend that criminal without the camera. Yes.
Now, guys.
Okay, so yes, we will. You'll most likely get your request.
Councilmember Starbuck.
I'm just wondering if these things have a year warranty on
them. Chief, do they have a year warranty?
Yes, actually, this expenditure is also tied to the server for the mobile, the in-car videos, and it provides for 3 years of full coverage.
Yes, Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. I move that the council approve the award of the contract to purchase a citywide CCTV system from RoboVu of Phoenix, Arizona, in the amount of $171,954, and authorize the purchasing and materials manager to issue a purchase order, and that Chief Dabney return in a year from the date that the cameras are up and running to report on how they are going. Thank you.
And a second.
I'll second that.
And we have that with the understanding that if you retire earlier, you have to come back prior to receiving your pension.
I'll be back next council meeting.
Okay. I don't think we got, did we get public comment on this? Anybody want to talk about this? It was consent, but still. Nope, nobody wants to talk about it. Okay. So any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote. And that passes 4-0 with one abstention, or with one absent. And what now? Disclosure time. Written communications. Any written? Yeah, we have a written communication. Yes. Pass it out. We have a written communication.
You received a copy of an email from Justin Rouget, one for item number 4 and one for item number 3.
Okay. Yeah, let the record show that we all received that by email. And oral communications, last 2-minute opportunity. Seeing no one rise. Council agency requests, comments, and meeting reports. Councilmember Carter.
Thank you, Mary Lynn. A really interesting point was brought up to me during our previous break, and that is in regards to this SB CAG issue. Because you have a conflict of interest.
I'll cover that. It's fixed. Bob's going.
Right, no, and we mentioned that, but because I actually wanted to address something else related, because you have a conflict of interest and can't be included in the discussions during those SBCAG meetings in the future, that prevents there from being an representative to push every meeting to agendize, or excuse me, to bring up the issue of the Robinson Bridge coming to fruition earlier than 2035 or whatever it is.
Actually, when we leave the Central Avenue Bridge issue, I don't have a conflict of interest with regard to the Robinson Bridge, once the other issue is resolved.
Okay, so would it require an agendized item for us to give you authorization or ask you to, because I understand that they have a calendar, but I think that if we feel adamantly enough about it, which I think we should, because we all know that this is a safety hazard and we don't know if this is going to last, if we can have you as a representative make it a point to continue to request that this be brought, closer than 20, 30 years out.
Yeah, let me get that in my report because I'll talk about it.
Okay.
Right here. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to report that on June 22nd, myself, along with 2 other council members, had a wonderful trip down to Oxnard. And let's see, on June 29th, I represented the city out at the penitentiary for a community meeting. On the 30th, I, along with another council member, I believe it was the mayor, represented the city at the graduation of some nurses from the adult education class, and I believe that was it. Thank you.
Councilmember Starbuck.
Well, I'm going to say that I had a very good flower festival. I had a good 4th of July. Cruise night was fun, and I'm glad that the Chamber's putting on the Old Town Market, and I hope that everybody in town was able to take advantage of that.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mary Lynn. I'm pretty sure most of the public already knows, but I have to disclose it because we did use city funds. I traveled to the city of Fresno to speak in front of the Citizens Redistricting Commission for the state, and the city paid for a rental car for a day, for gas, and for a bottle of water.
And let the record also reflect that she got a free room and board from her sister, and had fun. And was speaker number 12. And according to people who watched it, was very persuasive. So good things. Okay, with regard to the first subject, which is SB-CAG and the issue with regard to the Central Avenue Bridge, there is actually a subcommittee, sub-regional meeting tomorrow where that item will be heard, and Councilmember Lingle and I discussed this previously, and he will represent the city at that and present the results of this meeting. The item that is before SB-CAG incorporates an improvement to the entrance to Lompoc with regard to crossing the river. And there were currently 2 items under consideration. One would be the improvement of the Robinson Bridge and the access to it. And the second one would have been the Central Avenue extension. And this item has been on hold at SB-CAG for a couple months while this body took an action, and Councilmember Lingle will present that tomorrow. Presumably, the sub-regional will do what it is that we asked them to, what this council asked them to do this evening. And then once that item is removed from that potential study that would remove the conflict with regard to me. In the past, I have spoken to that board specifically about the pedestrian issues on the bridge. There have also been discussions with regard to the bridge and the 100-year flood, and I gave them copies of the engineer's report for the river erosion of Parkland, which also dealt with the 100-year flood and the revision to that based on dam operations. So the current bridge is not at risk in the 100-year flood. And then we had discussions about the bridge approach and some alternate ways of curing that problem rather than raising the road 8 feet. And so I have been proactive with regard to that. Individually, I'd like to report that I went to about 9 meetings over the past 2 weeks. I was a little off my feed because I had a couple things going on. And Councilmember Lingle and I did attend the class the other night where 11 young ladies were presented with their LVN graduation and are now going to take the state test. In the last class from our Lompoc Unified School District adult education, they had a 100% pass rate. And so those gals have spent 1,400 hours in clinical work in the process of obtaining this truly amazing work. Finally, the reason I've been a little off my feed, I think many of you know that a week ago Friday, the day before Flower Festival, I reached an agreement with an old friend of mine to sell Speedy Towing here in town to Greg of Smitty's Towing out of Santa Barbara. And I would classify it as he wasn't looking to buy and I wasn't looking to sell, and it turned out good for both of us. And all of my folks went to work for him, so I'm kind of out of the towing business, although I still have one truck and the name, but not generally for public work. And so I gave the city notice to cancel my business relationship with the city, and I also notified the police department we'd no longer be able to provide towing services to them. And I think that's my list. Did I get it all? Yeah? Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Nope. Seeing no one rise, we will be adjourned to the regular meeting on 7 p.m., July 19th, 2011. Thank you all for your time.